Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A. I don't know what happened there, Brendan. I pressed the
That's
wrong
all
button
good.
and I'm looking. I think I can see us. We shouldn't be there yet.
It's okay.
Hey,
Just
look,
watching the comments in the YouTube.
already coming through. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Keep them coming, everybody. So good to see everybody here today, and look forward to digging into the comments a little bit later. My very special guest today is Brendan Valiant, and we're going to be discussing the hacking of the White Estate
Yes.
and
Glad to be back.
your involvement, and also kind of all the spin-off ramifications of it. Even Steve Daly
Yes.
was inspired to write a whole book, 2 books, based on a lot of that information. So, and one thing I will come to is addressing the title that's caused a bit of a fracas. And just before we get into the conversation, I do want to just quickly thank everyone for their patience last week. I was away, and so I did a couple of early shows in the week and kind of released them, and one went live while we were here and one you could play back later. And my program, The 7 Questions You Can't Ask an Ordained Pastor in the Public Sphere, has received a lot of responses, and that is fantastic. I love the engagement. We're here to have conversations and engagements, and I love Seventh-day Adventist people, honestly. I left for personal reasons, theological reasons. The whole women's ordination thing for me personally was too much. But Adventist people are brilliant. There's something about conversing with Adventists that you could cover the whole spectrum from
Yes.
authenticity to delusion to really wonderful, heartfelt people. So, yeah, I want to keep that in mind. We're not attacking people, and we're just entering into dialogue. Just to let people know that exactly this time tomorrow, I have Timur Kajolja. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And on the next day, we have Bill Fritz, who is very prolific on Facebook in many Facebook groups and online, and he will be on the program. And then our gospel program at the end of the week, join us for a special message from Hal Southwell. And the title of his presentation is The Freedom of the Gospel Empowers Worship. So I can't wait to chat to Hal about that. Someone wrote to me this week, Brendan, and said, look, when I eventually watch enough SDA Q&A programs and I'm full with the knowledge, instead of leaving, I'm still going to come on the weekly gospel messages, because that's something that's for everybody.
Yes.
And it's a real focus on the positive. One last quick thing. I don't know if you noticed, Brendan, I put up a identical banner on our Facebook group. It has had for maybe 4 or 5 years. It has been SDA Q&A, a former Adventist looking in from the outside. All I did was play with Canva, made some things a bit smaller, some things a bit bigger. And, well, now we see who the real Peter is. And I thought that was very interesting.
I did see that, and I thought some of the comments that you received were a bit ungracious. I mean, it's your platform to do with what you will. It's not the same as, and you were correct, Voice Life Fellowship. I think people, you have several networks, that are running simultaneously. And so you've got, SDA Q&A is like your version of the US MSNBC, and Voice Life Fellowship's more like CNN, and they cater to different audiences. You don't have a Fox News equivalent, but maybe one day you can.
No, that's this one.
Is that when I show up?
I think the 2 big differences, and they have never changed.
Yeah.
They have never changed. The 2 big differences are SDA Q&A, where I promote the interviews, and I don't allow people to comment on the wall. They can comment on the posts.
Yeah.
But I don't allow comment on the wall because all the interviews would just get lost, and there'd be all sorts of conversations, then an interview. So it has always been SDA Q&A, a former Adventist looking in from the outside, promoting the interviews.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this clearly for those watching.
Eh,
The voice, SDA People's Voice,
yes.
started and began probably my first group. This could be even 10 years ago. I don't know. A long
Mhm.
time ago. That was for Adventists particularly to be able to comment on the wall and have interactions with each other. And I've got a great team of admin there, and it's just there's very few people's comments will be not allowed.
Yeah,
One is a
and I see you do
conversation,
you
and
do
one
put
is a
up
promotion of this.
you do put up with a lot there, and I think that's testament to the freedom of speech that you and I would both agree is a linchpin of Western civilization.
Mm,
I would just say that you're doing a service for future Adventist historians, or Christian
exactly. Yeah.
historians,
Yeah.
because you're preserving in conversation mode a lot of history here. Yeah, sometimes they're just dialogues over theology, but even then, that's helpful for future historical theologians. But historians who wish to understand what has transpired, not just in the past, but in the modern history of the Adventist Church, it's invaluable. So I congratulate what you're doing here. It's amazing.
Thank you. I've often felt it's a time capsule. For
Yes.
those of you watching now, 50 years on from 2024,
Speaking of
welcome
time,
to the program.
happy Disappointment Day.
Yes, that's one of the reasons we wanted to have the show today.
Or for
We
those
were
who are
talking
over in the US, happy
tomorrow.
Disappointment Eve.
Eve, yes, yes. I always see it as a cluster of 21, 22, 23.
Yes.
21 was the great anticipation. 22 was the anticipation's brewing. Oh, non-event. 23 is really the big disappointment.
Yes.
My daughter is born on the 23rd. It's her 12th birthday tomorrow,
Okay.
and it's the opposite of a great disappointment.
Yes. Well, happy birthday to your daughter.
Yeah, yeah, exciting. So one last thing on that, the social media thing, someone wrote and said, look, I'm a printer and I noticed these nuances and what you've added, and thank you for now being at least honest. It's literally the identical wording, slightly different font size adjustments. And one last thing, the SDAQ&A intro, which I'll just quickly bring up for 1 second. Watch what's going along the bottom. This has been going for maybe almost 300 interviews. And clearly says the exact same thing. So I apologize to those who A, got confused with the two groups. I'll do better at being clearer about how I promote that. And B, at those who didn't see my
I think it's
subtitle.
okay for you to do an apology that's somewhat tongue in cheek. I'm sorry you didn't see it. You didn't do anything wrong, Peter.
My first apology was I need to be clearer.
Yeah.
My second apology is tongue in cheek. It's
Yes.
very clearly there.
Yeah.
But anyway, look, sometimes I come across as a little bit sarcastic. It's my sense of humor. I'm trying to be funny, and sometimes it's not that funny.
It's an Aussie thing. It's well, I mean, I think that God was Aussie because there's a lot of sarcasm from God and his people in the Bible. So
There's a lot of self-reflection
yeah.
from the believers as well.
Well, I just think of that Elijah moment where he's like, maybe, scream a bit louder. Maybe he's on a vacation. Maybe he's on the toilet. Maybe he's sleeping. That's classic
That is
sarcasm.
classic. Yeah, yeah, that is gold. That is gold.
And there's no wonder that God wanted him up in heaven with that sort of humor. Let's just take him up.
Come there now.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, so our title today is I Hacked the White Estate. Now, let's
Your words, not me.
Yes, my words. And the term hacked has been used
Yes.
and has been placed upon you by others.
Mm.
And that's why I wanted to use it in the title. It's a
Yeah.
pretty clear, wow kind of thing to say and accuse someone of. And that's why I put it in the title. And that's what we're going to chat about today so that we can really explore this and explore
Yes.
the material you did find, but place it in the setting of how it was found. So look, I'm going to hand it over to you. Maybe did you want to bring up that Mark Anthony comment just to
Let's
kick
do that in
off,
a
or
second.
leave that?
I'll just do some legal stuff to begin with.
Sure.
So one thing I cannot speak about is I cannot speak about the settlement that was arrived at, other than to say it was amicable from the outset. I can say that it was at no cost to myself. That's one thing that I can say, and I can talk around the lawsuit a lot, but I just can't say what the precise provisions of the settlement were. Like, it was literally no cost to myself. I can say that, and it was amicable. I cannot. I can speak however I want about the White Estate and the SDA Church. There was no disparagement, non-disparagement clause, although I know that those are desired. So take what you will. I was
Can you just explain what that is? What is a
so
no?
some contracts or settlements come with you are not allowed to speak ill of the person that you have signed the settlement with. You're basically, it's a gag order. I'm under no gag order other than the negotiation and the final settlement itself. You know, so and finally, as to the hacking of the White Estate, I will be able to talk about just what actually went down. So I will be able to talk in detail about that and where I was involved and others. If you ever did want to, now I know you asked if my wife could come on. If she was ever interested, she can talk about the settlement, the final settlement. I have no problem with that because she's not a signatory as a respondent to that settlement. So if you ever wanted to talk to her, she's just busy with the kids today.
Sure.
My daughter did wander in a little bit earlier, and that's okay. If she comes over, I'll pick her up.
I saw your face light up.
Yes. So there are just the things that I can and can't talk about from the outset. So basically I can talk about almost everything except for the confidential aspects of the final settlement. I can say what was not in there. I just can't say what was in there. So yeah, that's it. Now Mark Antony. Now I do. I lost it. Let me just find it again. Oh no, here it is. It's back. So Mark Antony did put something here, and I thought it was quite interesting because we've had some back and forth, Mark Antony and myself, with regards to being on your program before, and it's gone back to top comments. All comments finds it easier. So yeah, Mark Antony said, Peter Dixon, I hacked the White Estate in quotations. Isn't that illegal? Moreover, isn't it morally corrupt to steal and be proud of it? St. Peter would not be happy unless, of course, it were a cry of deep confession and much weeping. Well, I didn't know that Cardinal Mark Antony was of a Catholic persuasion, but that's an eye-opener to me. I thought he was a pseudonym for someone who was in the church, SDA church still, but that's okay. When it comes to, so there's two main issues here. Is it illegal? No, what I did was not illegal. What the group that I was part of did was not illegal. Number two, isn't it morally corrupt to steal and be proud of it? This assumes that hacking is stealing. Okay, it assumes something that you hack is something that you steal. So these are two issues that we can talk about. What I can do is just give you a bit of a story. So I've been I came into the Adventist church from without. That's been part of what I've shared before. And one thing that fascinated me was when I was not even a baptized member. I went to Brisbane North Adventist College. It's now North Pine Christian College. And during the grade 11, I think it was, so I wasn't baptized until mid year 12. So that was so in 1998 in year 11 we did the excursion, the senior class, year 11 excursion that went down to the Snowy Mountains. But on the way we stopped at Avondale, and at the research centre, the Ellen White Research Centre there, I was fascinated by the vault, as any young person who's read a lot of mystery novels and was fascinated by, you know, things that are vaulted up. And I, as part of that, I said, well, why isn't all of this stuff released? Why is it all locked away? It didn't make sense to me if Ellen White's so important. And I was just on my journey into the Adventist Church. I'd recently been a part of, I think, Net 98. I think that had happened. So I'd done Net 98. I hadn't made a decision yet. That didn't happen until Net 99. Doug Batchelor was a little bit more persuasive than White Nelson. They were both persuasive, but Net 99 was what I made the decision after. So Net 98 has happened. I'm at the vault and I'm like, well, this Ellen White person, she's quite significant to your church. Why is stuff still not available? Because they were saying that up to a third of her words were not released. You know, it was basically spoken of boldly. And then I went to do study at Avondale in 2000 and 2001, and I spent a lot of time down there just kind of looking, because you were allowed to request a manuscript and then look at it. But at that time, there weren't smartphones with the ability to photograph them and everything. So it's basically you look at it and you put it back. So it was a fascination for me for many, many years. And it was not, I'm not the only person in the world out of the, you know, millions of Adventists who felt that way. So come into, 2010, I'm back studying at Avondale College. And I'm starting to write things about Ellen White hermeneutics at this time. And I got frustrated because the idea that you could write something about what Ellen White said, and then in a year's time, the White Estate could release a new compilation and it undoes your research. Because now there's quotes that are available that, you know, contradict what's written. And I was very frustrated by that. And I think, you know, either side of the divide, this would have been a frustration. You know, if you're anti-Ellen White or you're pro-Ellen White, it's a frustration that you don't have access to everything that is there. And you've got these compilations that sometimes the ellipses are before the sentence begins. So that means that they're starting mid-sentence, and the ellipses go at the end of what's provided. So they don't even finish the quote. So they're taking a portion of a longer, because Ellen White can write some prolific sentences. And so you've got a portion of a sentence with ellipses to begin and ellipses to end. And you go, well, what's going on here? What's the context? What's going, you know, what am I missing? And so this was a frustration for me and for other people. And so there was a kind of a loose group that came together called, well, it eventually came to be called SD Anonymous. So if you remember back at that time, there was a group called Anonymous that was doing a lot of hacking of different things and releasing things. There was two groups. There was Anonymous and there was WikiLeaks. And we did have a question of whether we go SD Anonymous or whether we call ourselves Whitey Leaks. But we went with SD Anonymous because it rolled off the tongue a bit better. And anyway, this was what we were discussing. So there were groups that would go and visit different people. The group included people who would go and visit different centers like the Avondale one, request a manuscript, copy it, photograph it, etc., and then they would now have that in the combined collection. So they'd pass it and share it amongst everyone, because by this stage that was allowed. Individual copying of manuscripts was allowed in many of the centers. In some of them, it had to be a bit discreet, of, you know, like taking a smartphone picture. And anyway, it was accumulating slowly, because you've got hundreds and hundreds, thousands of manuscripts that are unpublished or partially published. And it was going very slowly. And around this time, it was discovered the digitization had happened. You know, it had happened a long time ago, and it was only available to the heads of these research centers. You know, these places like the Center for Adventist Research, or the one in Loma Linda, and so only the directors had access. Not even the secretaries or other staff had access. And so knowing that there was a database already digitized, it was a question of, is this on the web? And through different, queries, it was found out that it was accessible on the web. It wasn't desktop only. It was web based. It was through, and so different attempts were made to, can we get the passwords? Can we brute force the passwords? Those things were tried. Eventually, around this time, so in 2000 and at the end of 2011, I moved to Armenia. So in Armenia, that is where I'd met my wife, and I went there to spend time with her. We got very quickly engaged and then married. And this was, that sort of, she was very much in favor. She's also someone who came from outside the church. Is like looking at, I explained what we were doing, and she was like, this is, why is it not available? It's the, I'm seeing things like you just posted, this is why Adventism is so convoluted. It's, why is there so, to a reasonable person, this stuff should have been available. And you find that all over the place. So as part of the research team, we looked at how we can access these files. And eventually the team settled upon, now at this time, I was not a member of the Adventist Church. I want to state that. So I was deemed to be someone who would not face internal consequences like disfellowship, etc., censure that could happen within the Adventist Church. And so I, raised my hand. I'm happy for all trails to lead to me, because you can't do things like overcoming technological prevention measures without leaving a trail. So I said, I'm happy for it to lead to me. It's perfectly fine that way. So a server was prepared to have all traffic coming, like a VPN. So all traffic would be showing coming to Armenia. I'd made a big thing about being in Armenia, so I believe that I was well known to have been there. So it was we let the breadcrumbs fall at me. What I didn't know at the time was, and I didn't even care at this point, but I didn't know that Armenia was actually not a signatory to any international agreements on hacking at the time. So the question of whether it was illegal, well, in Armenia, no. In Armenia, it wasn't. And so that also protected me and my wife, because they tried to bring my wife into it. I'll talk about that later. So we were protected in Armenia because it, at that time, was not a signatory. Additionally, even if it was, my wife, at the time, she had family members high up in government. And so we probably wouldn't have had anything happen anyway in that country. So the process that was used to hack the white estate at the end is a process known as, now if you want to look this up, anyone, I'll explain it a little bit. It's called SQL injection. So websites of certain types use an SQL database to hold their information, and so it's like that's the database that happens on the PHP pulls those things up. The PHP and the HTML will pull up from the SQL database the information to display it on the screen. Now, if a website is not fully secured, you can, in the search bar of the website, type certain things that can pull up SQL information, the database information. And so injecting that into the SQL, we found out how we could access these databases. And so that was what happened, and it happened, and we were able to slowly, but more quickly than visiting the research centers, by we I mean the SD Anonymous, was able to access all of this. It had access to all of the materials, and so that was the process. Now, it's not stealing. Have you ever seen, taking your mind back to Blockbuster days when you used to rent a movie? Do you remember renting videos and VHS? Do you remember when at the beginning of the movie it would say you wouldn't steal a car, you remember those
Yes.
those
Yep.
things? You
And
wouldn't
you
steal
weren't
a
allowed to
car.
fast forward through it, and there was this full like 3 minutes of
It's like trying to guilt trip you
yeah,
not to copy it.
yeah,
Don't copy it onto another thing. Well,
yeah.
it was a false equivalency. You know, stealing a car deprives the person of the car. Copying a movie actually doesn't deprive the person of the original movie. It's you know, it's not the same thing. They should have gone with something else. So it's like, you know, you wouldn't steal a car, no. But if I could copy a car, I'd definitely copy a car. Like if I could just go, you know, copy, paste over there, there's a new car. Yeah, I'm taking that car. It's so it's a very different matter. And as far as, you know, piracy, Jesus was the very first pirate. He took 5 loaves and 2 fishes and turned them into the ability to feed 5,000 people. I just thought that would be something to share. You know, like he pirated 5 loaves and 2 fishes and filled 12 baskets with leftovers. So, yeah, this is the, you know, just some of the
And you're not like with the piracy of music and videos, there's a case to be made that you're depriving the creator of income. But with this,
So yes, so
with
that's
this, it's not. It's not. It's source material that's not making them any money or losing money.
Yes and no. So yeah, so the stealing is actually, you're correct. The stealing is not the thing itself. The stealing is the potential for income. Now, the wider state, so this comes into another matter, and this, so let's first of all talk about their lawsuit before I come into how I defend.
Yes.
So we, just to get to bridge from that, the SD Anonymous, and I also started the websites for this. SD Anonymous started to go, okay, well, actually, no, I'll disclose something that is breaking news. SD Anonymous did not get everything. We got most of everything, but we didn't get every unpublished document. And that's because inevitably they found out that there was this increased traffic coming from Armenia, and they looked into it and they're like, oh no, something's happening. And they closed it. It took them about 2.5 months to close it down. But the process of SQL injection was very slow. I mean, we're not talking about, you know, the internet speeds we have today.
No.
And so it was a slower process, especially through a server. And we didn't get everything. So we were like, okay, well, we got most of it. But there's still a significant amount for us to have to visit the things, and they've already fixed it. They closed up the vulnerability. So what we decided was to do a feint. You know, we would set up a situation so that we would force them to release it all. So the only way you can really do that is to start basically a rival Ellen White estate. And so what we started doing was releasing.
Because all that material's out of copyright, isn't it?
I'll get to that in a moment. So I'll get to that. They claimed it was in copyright, but it wasn't. So what we started doing is we said, okay, one thing we want to do is we want to not just have this in English. We had a team of people who were international. And so we started to go, okay, this is going to take us time if we're going to translate it as well. So we hired translators, and we decided to put a smaller price on the releases that we were doing than what the Ellen White estate was doing, knowing that it wasn't going to go on for very long. And if it did, we'd just release everything that we had. So we started compiling the materials, and it was, it was less than $10 per release, and we were releasing them digitally with and it was possible to even just copy it as well. We didn't care, like people were copying and disseminating it. We were just doing that. But as you understand, the Adventist Church only responds to money on things, like Conrad Vine's in a situation he's in because he dared question money. I mean, I'm the only excommunicated Seventh-day Adventist in history, I think. By that I mean I'm not just disfellowshipped, I'm excommunicated because I dared start a rival church. Excommunication is, you are not welcome. I mean, I'm not allowed to step foot on on a property or event run by the Adventist Church in my conference here in North New South Wales. So, and that's because we have a church that receives tithe only because the Adventist Church refused to take our tithe. We offered it, but the church loves, like above all things, it's money. And so they, as soon as there was this idea that people were making available materials that weren't them, they didn't have control, they stepped in. So they started an investigation that took from the time that they closed off our access. So the hacking basically happened from February to May. So part of February through to May of 2012. And then their investigation happened from May to August, which is when they launched their lawsuit. They launched 2 lawsuits at the same time. So they launched a lawsuit in the United States and in Australia simultaneously against me. Now, the thing was that I wasn't in either of those places. The funny thing about the lawsuit in Australia, they had hired this private investigator. We'll talk about their potential costs later on. They had a private investigator watching or he was either watching or he'd paid one of the neighbours to watch my mum's house in Queensland, in Brisbane. And so he was watching and waiting until I got home. Well, whoever it was, him or whoever he had paid to keep an eye on things, because I can't imagine him just sitting there for ages, mistook my brother for me. Now, I don't know how he didn't probably have much to go on, but he mistook my brother for me. And when my brother turned up, he decided to say, hey, he's there. And then the service of papers was made. Now, papers were served on my autistic brother. So not the brother they mistook me for, but the one that lived there. So it was, papers were incorrectly served on my autistic brother. And that's how the proceedings began. I heard about it because my brother rang he's a high functioning autistic, but he rang my mum, who at the time worked for QPS, and she contacted me in Armenia and said, hey, there's a guy who's served papers on Ashley that, you're being sued. And I said, okay, well, I kind of expected it. I kind of was like waiting for it. So I'm like, okay, time to start this ball rolling. And so we had, I got in contact with their lawyer, and they, I said, you guys know that you incorrectly served the wrong person. Anyway, that's how it started. That's how the lawsuit started. And they were claiming damages for lost income because they claimed that the materials were copyrighted and belonged to the white estate, and that the hacking and the disseminating of it, whether it had been free or not, or paid, the dissemination was a reduction of their income. And this speaks to the white estate, and we'll talk about that. The white estate has aggressively maintained, had up until that 2015, which was a few years after, they had maintained an aggressive monopoly on these writings so that they could release their compilation every year or two that would have a few more statements and drip feed this to the public. So they claimed, so the 2 claims were ownership, the white estate owned it, and copyright, that these were in copyright. So I basically didn't, I would respond to the lawyer, but I didn't respond to the court until December. So August is when the service happened. I didn't respond until September to the court because they hadn't properly served me. And so they were like, I'm not going to respond and place myself in service until they've properly served me. So they had to make all of these applications to serve me in absentia and all this. I made it very difficult for them. I'm not going to make it easy. And so I kept on just kind of laughing, going, well, I'm not actually being sued. I'm not even a respondent yet. And when I did, that gave me a lot of time to do research, and the team did research, but I, being the main Australian there, I used the same methods that I researched the Bible. I researched the legal code of Australia, and it was actually I'd always, before I became a Christian, I'd wanted to be a lawyer. So it kind of got that out of my system. So I researched both Australian and American law because I'm facing two fronts. And but I only responded to the Australian one because I didn't. The American one had even harder time with service. They hadn't been taken to serve me either. So I just said, well, I'll just the Australian one actually happened technically first, so I'll respond to that, and that had the biggest amount of dialogue with the lawyer. So what I found is that in the US, which is where the wider state is based, number one, it wasn't in copyright, so their copyright claims were null and void. The copyright expired in 2003, and that was because it was there had been it should have actually expired earlier, like in the 70s or 80s, but there's been a lot of lobbying to keep copyright extended. Did you hear anything about the Mickey Mouse thing that happened last year, like at the beginning of this year? So Disney particularly has been trying to keep copyright extended for longer and longer periods, because when it started to come up that Steamboat Willie was going to become public domain originally, they're like, oh no, we're going to start to lose our entire library catalog of things. Now, because of their dogmatic, Disney's dogmatic attempt to hold on to this copyright, it's actually prevented public domains of all sites from going into materials from going into public domain and accessed by the world for a long time. So the extensions that they kept applying for expired at the end of last year for Steamboat Willie, and for things like Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh was a couple of years earlier. You might have heard about that. And because of this control to keep things from entering public domain, as soon as Winnie the Pooh became public domain, they made a horror movie. I think it was called Pooh, Blood and Honey. And so it's just to poke fun at the idea that, now we've got it, we're gonna do worse than what you thought we would have done. If you just let it happen, it would have been a lot easier. And so they've done a similar thing with Steamboat Willie. They've made a horror movie, or they're making a horror movie, I think, with Steamboat Willie version of Mickey Mouse, because they just, well, this is what you get for preventing the public domain release. So 2003 was the year that legally the materials went into the public domain. They were trying to, and I can go through some of that with you. I'm just giving you an overview now. The other statement of ownership came down to trust law. And so I researched California trust law from the period that Ellen White's will was in effect. And according to trust law, the trustees, which is the original trustees, were 5 people. There wasn't even the LNG Wider State Incorporated didn't come into existence until 1933. So 28 years after her death. And so it was not the trustee at the time, and the people who, you could say, okay, it's become the trustee. They've transferred, but they don't transfer. The trustee doesn't own the thing that they are keeping in trust. And so if you look at her will, she said that these 5 people, were to hold it in trust. So it doesn't specify who the beneficiaries are, but other letters that she wrote, including to people who became trustees, it tell us that the people were the beneficiaries. So the ownership was every person who held Ellen White's writings to be special.
Not just those listed on the trustees.
No, the trustees we have a trust for our kids. If you have a trust, you have the trustor. The trustee is the person who holds the trust in balance. You've got the settler, the one who settles the trust and starts it up, the trustee, and you have the beneficiary. Okay, the beneficiaries are the ultimate owners of the trust. So her writings were for the people, and so I proved this, through her writings, through her, through other documents. In fact, there was a book that was invaluable to me at this time, and because I was in Armenia, I couldn't access it. I had someone photocopy the entire book and send it to me, and it's a book by Gil Valentine called The Struggle for the Prophetic Heritage. A great book if you want to look at how the trust of the trust of Ellen White's writings came into effect, and what happened there. I can quote some excerpts from that today as well if you're interested in that. But he talked about how there was this power struggle within the five trustees, the original five trustees, to keep so from the very beginning, from basically their first board meeting in October of the year she died. She died July 15. So in October of that year, the board is meeting and saying, well, I think 3 or 4. So a majority was saying, let's release nothing. Let's never release anything except what's already out there. And Willie White, who was one of the ones who was promoting releasing stuff, he was frustrated for years until he unofficially released a couple of compilations, which are Medical Ministry, I think it is, and another one. But he released them and got in a heap of trouble. They actually threatened to stop paying him a wage, his salary from the GC. And so they really came down hard on him. And it wasn't until the next generation that they started to say, okay, we can make money off of these by releasing stuff. And so that's where that went. Now, I'm not opposed to the White Estate making money when they're using it for things like translating materials. That's valuable and valid, but there's also a balance between, okay, and some of the reasons they gave for not releasing them were she wrote letters to people that might be embarrassed about them. Well, that was the case all through her life. The 9 volumes of testimonies, those are letters to people who, you see, like some of them, they have the first letter of their name and then the underscores, because it's like, well, this is a person still living. In fact, it was written like 2 weeks ago in some cases, and some of them were rebukes. But it was not a valid argument from the get-go, and it became less valid as not only those people but their children and grandchildren passed away. And so by 2003, now my research found through deep diving in the web, found that, and not just mine, but the other teammates, they had digitized this material in I think the 80s. They'd actually converted it all. They'd had it all typed up in the 80s, and then they were planning to release it as early as the 90s, and even into the 2000s. I found letters. There's a database of letters that, like, Q&A. It's questions that have frequently asked questions that have been given to the White Estate through the Center for Adventist Research. So Will Fagel, he has there's all of these letters that have been written to him, emails that have been written to him that he's responded to, and there's a database of them. And quite a few of these letters or emails were regarding the unpublished materials. And he would make statements, oh, it's about to be released. It's about to be released. Now, the thing is, if they had released it before 2003, they would have extended the copyright for another 70 years.
What?
So by not releasing it, they actually shot themselves in the foot.
Wow.
And so you come to 2003, and they should have released it, and then there's silence about this idea of releasing them. In 2005, they started a new project called the Annotated Ellen White Writings, and it started with one guy who actually died before the first volume came out, or I think it was, yeah. So it started with one researcher, and it eventually, by the time where SD Anonymous is hacking these materials, they haven't released volume 1 yet. They release it around the same time that we hack the materials, so that they can say we're robbing them of income. And so that's in 2012. To this day, we still don't have volume 2. Volume 2 is not released of the annotated. Now, volume 1 goes up to, from 1845 to 1850 something. It's not even that many years, because they're trying to explain away difficult statements and contextual issues that are happening there. It's out at the press. Someone's just said. Okay, well, if you think about it, that's 12 years to do a volume. That's a long time. If we were to have been waiting for the annotated volumes, then we will be waiting for the final volume. I mean, there are years where she writes in the early where we only have extant maybe 3 manuscripts or letters from her writings. But you get to the years, especially between 1890 and 1905, where she's written hundreds and hundreds that we have preserved of her letters. Like, I don't see how they're going to do a single, like each year will eventually need a single volume in those periods. So we would be going, okay, it's not difficult to how difficult it is to research these matters. I have no problem with them releasing them after the fact. Ellen White reconsidered. I believe that they should have released everything and then still done their project. I have no problem. 2 things can happen at the same time. And so, if we were to wait for that, our grandkids would probably receive the final volumes.
Yeah.
And maybe not even then, if they have, a change of heart somewhere along the way. So that's the issue. It took, from December, my first affidavit that I submitted was rejected by the court because I couldn't swear, because I couldn't get a JP. There was no JPs in Armenia. So I eventually was told you have to go to get a notary. They'll accept a notary of the country of Armenia. So eventually the affidavit was officially accepted in March of that year. And after March, they basically stopped any pushing of once they saw my affidavit, the evidence I presented, the defense that I'd mounted with regards to things like copyright, with regards to things like ownership, all of a sudden, I'd been saying, hey, let's settle this up until then. I'm like, this is going to go bad for you. Let's settle it. And I can talk about this part. All of a sudden, after March, they're starting to come to me going, let's settle it. Like, interesting. So before then, they were saying the only way they'd settle was if you give all names of people who are involved. Like, basically, you've got to basically stab people in the back. And I said, I'm not doing that. So eventually, when they started saying, well, let's settle, there was none of that. So it was a much more, let's just pretend this didn't happen. It was more of a pretend this didn't happen. Simultaneously with them saying, we're going, let us settle. Simultaneously, there's this email that goes out by Jim Nix, who at the time was the director of the White Estate, and he said, he basically pretended that it wasn't connected to what had just happened. He said, we're going to be releasing on the 100th year anniversary of Ellen White's death, we're going to release all of her writings. So this is happening. We're now in 2013. So this is in, I think, April or May of 2013. They're saying it's April. It was April of 2013. They're saying in 2015, so in two years and a few months, we're going to be releasing everything. And so, like, the whole purpose of the what we did, and for the purpose of this lawsuit, was going to be null and void. Like, they're basically going to be saying there is no damages because they were going to release it for free on the internet for everyone. Not only that were they going to release that, they were going to release the Willie White letters file, the Edson White letters file, the James White letters file, and the Ellen White letters received file. So much more than we had. But they tried to pretend that there was no connection between what we had done. So we forced their hand. That I've spoken to people, SD Anonymous included some people high up. I can say that's all I'm going to say. But I've spoken to people who have connections within the White Estate. It was not even on their purview. They were not even looking at this until they saw the defense and the affidavits that I provided, which were basically, if it had gone to trial, I would have won. And not only would I have won, but it would have created precedents that they did not want to be responsible for setting. The precedent being that it would have the law was on my side, but it had never been adjudicated. So my case was that archival unpublished materials are out of date according to the period of the death of the author plus however many years. And so that was what I was promoting in my defense. It had no archival unpublished materials had ever been tested in this way. So if the White Estate had taken this to court, it would have been tested and confirmed that yes, every archive out there in the world that has unpublished material would be declared out of copyright. So somewhere, someday, that's going to be tested. But they didn't want to be the ones, I believe, responsible for that being tested. Also, it was they came to me to fight a war on the front of the legal side, and I was not prepared to fight just on that front. There was press releases that I and SD Anonymous sent out, and it was covered by A Today, it was covered by Spectrum. They don't know how to cope on public relations. The Adventist Church is terrible at public relations. And so this was starting to get picked up by non-Adventist blogs and things. So Ellen White reconsidered. So what SD Anonymous did was move up the release date a bit. It moved it up a lot. I mean, we're talking about 2024. It's in the press for Volume 2, which I think takes us to the 1860s. Okay, so yeah, my wife Alina is saying yes, so like 100 years earlier.
Yeah.
Plus, we might, it might have been 2844 by the time it's all finished, instead of 18.
Yeah, a lot of people have said, "Oh, well, it came out only at the same time or a year or two later, so they were going to do that anyway." But that is a miscalculation of the event.
They were not.
Have literally been. I know she's joking, but it could have been years and years and years.
Well, no, because we know that they had moved to this annotated release.
Yeah, you've got an example of it in motion.
Yeah, like from 2005, the first record article about this annotated release came out. And then the first volume is released in 2012 or 2013 or something like that, showing that it's taken 8 years for that first volume to come out. And now the second volume is 12 years.
Yeah.
So, like thinking of that release schedule, it's going to be a nightmare. You'll never see them, like the completed series. I'll never see them.
And did Nix actually release on her
on the birthday? Yeah, no, they did. So I was happy for that. They released most of it. There are the ones that are considered. There are the statements that are considered to be questionable. The manuscripts that are considered to be questionable, they're not there. Some of them are manuscripts that that were transcribed in her presence. So there's one that is not in the database, which is basically almost like a deathbed manuscript where she's saying she wakes up apparently, and it's described she woke up sort of in a startle, and she said, "I've got to warn the people. Great changes are going to come after I've gone." Now this was transcribed and it's part of the file, but it's not part of the thing in there because she didn't write it, and that's fine. Wow. But these are, that's one that's not there. There's a couple of the. I can go and have a look at them in a sec if you want.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a break in a minute, because what I want to come back.
Then you can come back with questions.
Yeah, come back with questions, and also I want to come back with some of the, is irony the right word? Perhaps not. But you are a fan of Ellen G. White. It's not part of your ministry per se in your New Border Church, but as your core, relating to her, your journey.
I'm positively inclined.
You hold her in high esteem. And ironically, there are people who want to have this stuff released to tear her down. And we want to come back after the break and talk a little bit about people like Steve Daly who have used this material, and he came across your work before it was officially released. And it has spawned 2 books. And to be honest, probably a lot of people have even left the church over his work that he's released. And and there's a lot of interest in that. So I want to chat about that after the break. Those watching now, if you've been asking questions, now's the time to cut and paste and put them back in there, because we'll be reading from here on in, and we'll have a short break, and we will be back very soon to discuss what you think about the impact of some of this content causing great consternation and potential harm to the Adventist church. And the other thing I wanted to chat about is, do you think some of the more recent times where they've really kind of like excommunicated you, and was there a little bit of a target on your back because of this? And they just thought, we'll get rid of him somehow. We couldn't do it that way, but we'll get him another way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can talk about that. Let's
Cool.
come back after the break, and
Come
you
back.
can prosecute me, cross-examine me.
Awesome. We will be back, everyone. Thanks again. Don't forget, tomorrow around this time, we have Thomas Kikulia. Next day, Bill Fritz, and our gospel message this week is with Hal Southwell. Can't wait. We will be back in 5 or 10 minutes. See you soon. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our session today, where we're chatting to Brendan Valiant and talking about the hacking of the wider state. We've got a lot of great questions coming in, great comments there, Brendan.
Yes,
Before
I've
we
seen.
before we go to them, let's just chat about what I was speaking of before the break. How do you feel, being someone that really loves Ellen White? How do you feel about this information finding its way into, for example, Steve Daly's book, that then used that information to reveal things that may not add up about Ellen White and caused people to potentially even leave the church?
Look, if we had just one book of the Bible, like let's say just any book, you just choose a book, and that's all that we had that was considered to be inspired, people would argue over that. You know, people argue over the Bible, people argue over Ellen White's writings. It's not like before this material was released, there was Walter Ray that was using the published writings the same way that Steve
Yeah.
Daly did. You know, so it's not an argument about the material itself. It depends on methodology that people are using. I can't say that I agree with Steve Daly's methodology. I've read most of his book in a speed read. It wasn't something that I felt was, you know, compelling, but you know, he's free to do that, and I think people should be free. I've seen, you know, you're obviously going to be seeing that side of things, people who come to the material from that side of it more than the people who come to it and go, hey, this is strengthened. Like, I've always questioned about this particular comment or passage that has these ellipses, and it's, you know, it's so good to read it in its context. I saw someone brought up the Z file in, you know, the so-called Z file, you know, that's this you know, kind of under lock and key for a long time. There was these these manuscripts and letters that were not even permitted by researchers that go into these vaults. They were not even permitted to be read. And these are correctly said. I think it was Ellen White Reconsidered. Now, is that Steve Daly?
No, that's Kevin.
Oh, Kevin. Oh, so Kevin. Yeah, so these were statements that were embarrassing. These were embarrassing statements at a time, and they were taken out of the Z file and put into the main file quite some time ago, when it was considered, you know, like, this is no longer an issue. I find the humanization. Hey, Kevin. I find the humanization of Ellen White to be profoundly helpful as I look at the, you know, like, some of the things that never got talked about in the past were the fact that James White had a stroke, became extremely difficult to deal with, and after that, you know, Ellen White was, you know, on eggshells with him. I mean, she's a person who dealt with a husband, a spouse who went through a stroke years before he passed away, and it changed his personality and everything. I think that. You know, I have no, I have not, that this strengthens my ability that these are real people. I'm just currently writing a series of scripts for someone on the life of Abraham, and I'm doing a deep dive into what the text says. And he was a flawed individual. He was a very flawed individual. He's yet, you know, his father Abraham, he had many sons, and many sons had I'm one of them. So are you. Like, this is a you know, a hero of the faith in the Bible, and yet his flaws are as great as his triumphs in many instances.
When I look at flaws, I have no problem with that. Where I perhaps would come into disagreement with you is that the flaws of a prophet or a leader or a person or a famous person, or, you know, whoever person next door, um, it's when a claim is made that certain material is directly given from God and then found out to maybe not be so true. That's my concern. And would you say
I
that?
have no problem with borrowing. The borrowing side of things.
I don't mean the borrowing. I
Okay.
mean a vision that didn't come true, or or when you start to examine certain prophetic pronouncements that don't turn out to be accurate.
I-
That's what concerns me. I don't give two hoots how flawed the person is. I think what is revealed to me in some of this material is
mm.
questions raised. Did God speak to her?
Let me preface what my response there with the fact that I don't use her writings, and I haven't since I started ministry in a non-denominational church. Her writings went, migrated from my main bookshelf to my garage bookshelf just because I just don't have any. I don't consult them unless I get into a discussion with an Adventist online, and like if I have to deal with Ellen White because they're like, but she said, I don't think that it's needed. As I said to you, I'm positively inclined towards her, as in, I think that there's value in her writings. I think that there is inspiration in her writings. That said, so I don't use her. If I'm asked about her, I say, well, look, I've seen all of the challenges to her writings, to her status as an inspired author, etc. And what I do is I distill down the kernel, the principle of the argument against her, on whichever one it is. And there's no argument against her writings that if I don't take that same principle, I can't find problems with the Bible. So, for example, the visions that don't come true. I mean, look at the minor prophets. Look at the major prophets. Some of those things that they saw never came true because they were conditional upon the obedience of Israel.
But see, if you then apply this even to the biblical prophets, can't anybody make a prophetic claim, doesn't come true? It was conditional. Like, how on earth can you then define an actual prophetic claim if you can just easily bring in the conditional one? That just takes away every possible objection to any claim we make or any prophet's made.
Potentially. I mean, for me, the Bible, the reason I take the Bible is because it's, when you look at it as a collection, as an anthology, it's not even a book. The Bible's an anthology of books. And when you look at it as an anthology, the interwoven tapestry, I personally like. I mean, and this is going to be the same as just the question about does God exist? I know He exists because I know Him. Okay, so I can't give you that knowledge. I can't give anyone else that knowledge. My experience is my experience. I have experienced His presence. I've experienced His power in my life, and I've experienced His voice even. So I'm 100% I'm unshakable on that. And then when I read the Bible, I detect that same through the Spirit. I see the tapestry. I see the interconnectedness of it. And I don't think that we need to, yes, there's arguments that the apologetics side of things, I'm happy to do, and I'm well versed in apologetics for the scripture. But that's not going to convince anyone any more than the teleological or the cosmological or the moral argument for the existence of God is going to convince someone. People need to taste and see.
Well, this is where it becomes nuanced, but also very important, because sure, if someone's going to have a personal relationship, personal connection, live their life based on these personal experiences, that's fine. But when you are trying to convince other people to fall in line with them, it would seem to me that when Ellen White came along and said, "Hey, I'm talking to God direct," that was such a powerful tool to use to have people come and align with her beliefs. To then think, oh, they were just as reliable as anybody's prophecy because some didn't come true. Oh, well, that's just conditional. It waters down the sense of conviction that people rallied around those ideas.
Yeah.
Now, if I decided to, believe in Odin, and I've watched a bit of the old Viking TV series.
Marvel doesn't count.
No, yeah, we can't criticize them. But they made exact identical claims. You experience Odin. Odin has worked through my life. That's how I know he is correct and your Christian God is wrong. That's the claims they were making. And again, fine if that's what they as a tribe or individuals want to do. But when you try, as you said, to convince people of your beliefs, my thought is you'd better have a pretty convincing evidence.
Yeah.
So Ellen White's master tool that she whipped out of the bag, the tool bag, was, I am getting this message direct from God.
Mm.
Many don't come true. The Bible has tests of a prophet where even if one doesn't come true, and Adventist apologists come in and go, well, the Bible prophets made the same mistakes, and oh, well, that one about the food for worms was conditional, and the thing about Battle Creek, it's conditional. So there's number one weapon to convince people. I'm in vision right now. Hear me and hear my words, bringing people into the church. If things are then proven to not occur, then how do you then defend that weapon of choice that has been so good at convincing people when essentially all you're saying is, well, it's how I feel and it feels good for me, and people can
Well,
feel good
I
about it. But how do you then convince people to join your thing when it's so impossible to prove?
So there's a lot of what you've said there. I think for me, the reason I don't use her in public ministry is because not because of the writings themselves, but because of the horrible PR of the Adventist Church in misusing and abusing her writings. And I think that some of the things that you've charged her with are unfair because they are later superimpositions that have been placed on, like it's the legend that created around her. Now,
Well,
yes,
what is the imposition of the food for worms vision?
well,
She said
no,
it.
no. What I
It
think
didn't
is that
happen.
you're making out that she was saying, "I've got this from God, therefore hear me and obey."
Mm.
I think that there's less of that kind of arrogant. I don't see that arrogance
Well,
in her
I'm not even
writings and
saying
in the.
it's I'm not saying it's arrogance.
Well,
I'm
no, no.
saying
Well,
that her
okay,
and James travelled from town to town,
yeah.
and he would warm up the crowd, wheel her out, she'd go into
See,
vision, and
see, just let me stop.
people would
Yeah.
join the denomination on her convincing evidence that wasn't later on that convincing.
Okay, so do you see how you've filtered that story through the language that you've chosen to use? Like he'd warm up the crowd. You're telling it like they're charlatans, they're snake oil salesmen. You're using that language, and I don't see. I
The
don't.
Aussie
I don't.
humour.
I don't. Sorry, I know it's humor, but I'm just trying to say I
Well,
don't
let
see
me
it.
just say it in a different way.
Okay.
He does a program. They go town to town. They are 100% convinced of the message they have.
Yeah.
They fully believe it. They pull together people. They harness in this message, and people are very much in listening and enjoying. And then Ellen White comes out and she goes into vision, and that very vision is so palpably, amazingly revealed and presented
Yeah.
that the audience goes, I want to join this church
Mm.
based on this incredible prophetic occurrence that's happening to me right now. So I've taken away all the humor and stuff, presenting it as it happened.
Yeah.
Then later on, no one's manipulating it. But later on, some of the things she said didn't happen. Some of the things that are revealed in the very manuscripts that you have been able to bring to the public reveal incongruencies,
Mm.
reveal things that actually may not have happened that we thought did happen.
Mm.
And therefore, my sense is, how can we claim any kind of prophetic power to this person? And that's what tends to then lead people to phrase things in ways that Stephen Daly does, or me with my little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor,
Yeah.
where you go, this was so important
Mm.
that this information was used to convince us to sign up for this movement, and it
Yeah.
turns out that these things did not come true, and the only example of defense is, well, it was conditional. And so
Yeah.
therefore I'm saying, well, any Joseph Smith can say that,
Mm.
anyone down the road having a vision can say that. And what therefore one must take into account is, don't have to say it's false, you don't have to say it's fraud, you don't have to say it's a show, but you
Mm.
have to say this is not real. She did not talk to God. And therefore, that shifts your whole narrative and your way of living if you firmly believed in her before that point.
So there's a couple of things here, and one of them is it's the level of theology that underpins your view of God's omniscience and omnipotence is going to impact here. So, for example, I was invited by one of your previous guests to join an ex-Adventist group on Facebook, and I was kicked out of there just as quickly as I was kicked out of the church. But what I saw very quickly was that there was a very strong Calvinistic undercurrent for this group, which didn't. And I find that people who are Calvinistic tend to be very black and white. Like Calvinism is very, very black and white in the way that it sees things. Yes, you can have people who are a little bit more grey if they're 4-point Calvinists or so on and so forth. But
can I just jump in there, because it's diverting from what I'm saying?
I know
You're essentially saying that these people also misrepresent or potentially do stuff, and I'm saying, but doesn't that prove my
No,
point?
I'm not saying that at all. No, what I'm saying is that if you have a view of God's sovereignty that is like absolute, there's only one future that he sees that is the one that will play out, which is the Calvinistic, and even to a looser extent the Arminian playbook. So Calvinism is that the future is predestined by God. Arminianism is a step back from that in the way I understand it. It's God created time, and then that time is that he didn't just create time, he created the timeline, and so it's predestination by timeline, not predestination by God. So he basically sees what's going to happen because it's going to happen. And free choice is not existent in Calvinism, and it's only it's only pretended to be existed in Arminianism. I believe in open theism, and the reason I'm saying this is I believe that God works on contingencies. You see this in the Bible. You see God as a God of the present. You see it in Abraham, where he's interacting in a personal way, where not only now God doesn't change, but God he adapts how he interacts. So that's not changing who he is, but he'll interact differently. I mean, Jesus never healed a blind person the same way. So the Jesus the same yesterday, today, and forever. Every time he heals a blind person, he does it differently. So there's differences in how he interacts with us, and it's according to where we're at. And just coming to that food for worms, because that's that's like one of the preeminent ones. There were things happening at that time which I believe match the idea of conditionalism, match what I expect from conditionalism, which is that there was a message that was coming within the Adventist church, within the Sabbath-keeping Adventists movement. There wasn't even an Adventist church yet. There was a movement that had begun in 1856, which, if it had gone on, Ellen White later talks about how if it had been taken to heart, then Jesus could have come before now. So she speaks into this idea of the conditionalism of Jesus coming, which we see from the Bible, hasten unto the coming of the Lord. There is some level where humans can impact the timing. So
I agree with all
so
that.
1856, what happened in 1856 is that, and it's not an Ellen White-led thing, it was James White. James White wrote in the Review and Herald a series of articles where he upended the theology that had existed between 1845 and 1856. So the earlier theology was that them out there, they are Laodicea, those Sunday keeping Adventists that have refused to walk in increasing light, and we are Philadelphia. So they had this concurrent churches of revelation. James White upended this in 1856 by saying, actually, we're Laodicea. It's been us. You are that man. And what happened was there started to be a revival amongst the Sabbath-keeping Adventists, where they're confessing things, they're apologizing to each other through the pages of the Review and Herald. But then it stopped. It kind of ceased, and part of that might have been the oncoming civil war, but it stopped. And she later said that had it been allowed to do its, and within within the middle of this is when she has her food for worms vision. So if she later on says Jesus could have come before now, and I think the first time she says that is in the 1860s, like late 1860s or early 1870s. If she's writing those words, then it generates a context of food for worms is within the context of had this movement that has been begun. We see a similar thing that happens in the 1880s where you've got the righteous by faith message that comes out. And instead of it being partially accepted, but just not allowed to, now it's thoroughly rejected. You see the leadership of the church with Butler and with Uriah Smith basically stamp out this movement, which would have brought it in line with, things like what we, get celebrated by what, Des Ford brought out before he, when he was a gospel Adventist without being outside. These sort of things were rejected, and she writes in the 90s that Jesus could, that Jesus coming was frustrated by that rejection. So she writes within the context of conditional expectations of the coming of Jesus.
I agree with that, and the general marination of Adventism supports that. But these instances where her visions are weaponized to bring about dramatic responses belies an understanding in her of what you are saying, and that she generally said. These are spike big top moments designed to bring in the crowds, designed to whip up fervor, and the Lord is coming back any day. We had better, it's fear-based. What you've said is logic. It's her general message. But one cannot deny that these are showmanship techniques, and I use the word wheeled out now, not in a joke. They are literally brought out in front of people into the public, and that's why former Adventists and people are so upset, because they feel hoodwinked. They feel that they've been tricked by the magic tricks. And people to this day, Joseph Smith did it with his little hat and the stones in the hat, and his apologists say exactly what you said. Oh, okay, so it creates a nice sense of conditional, and the Bible was the same.
Well, I've never heard I've never heard a Mormon use those same things. I think that's what I think you're just connecting the two and then saying they say the same thing. No, they don't.
What I'm saying is the possibility is there. Everyone
if you're talking about the possibility is there, then
to defend like, so the thing with Joseph Smith, he has his little hat and he looks in and he sees his seer stones and he says that, hey, look, this is what's happened, and people believe it. And later on people go, oh, maybe that didn't happen, but they're confused, so they defend him. And they defend him using similar principles that, not so necessarily saying you, but Adventist apologists use very similar principles to defend the prophetic person who is bringing out known stage tricks.
Okay,
so I'm a musician.
Well, that one
I've
wasn't
been in show business my whole life.
The hat and the stones. I think you're not very well versed on. I think you're using the Mormon thing as a barb rather than knowing, because he didn't do that in front of a wide audience. It was a very small audience.
Like I said earlier, it could be Joe Blow next door. Anyone who uses, God just spoke to me, I have a message for you. People in this very room, a small group of people, were told that so it was a technique. Whether she used it, I'm not saying she's disingenuous, but I'm saying it is a known technique to build an audience, to build fear, and to build a crowd.
Okay.
And then
can I just respond to that?
Hang on a second, just let me finish. So then marinate your general message with conditional stuff and, hey, I've, this and that and shifted and whatever. That takes away a person's right to feel upset. No, hang on a second. I was there. She said he's coming back. That made me and my family, and now 5 generations later, be Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
based on that, not the full marination of the general consensus of logic and you know, the conditional theories.
So the argument about showmanship can apply to the Bible as well. Like my thing I said to you at the beginning was that every argument, the kernel of any argument against Ellen White, can be also used to throw out the Bible.
I'm trying to take you away from the two wrongs make a right.
Well, what do you mean the two?
Well, if you're suggesting that there's showmanship wheeled out in the Bible, and if it is, well, that's wrong too.
Well, I don't see it as a wrong thing. I mean, any presentation of or promulgation of a message is going to come with an element of public relations to it. I mean, you look at the prophets that lie on their side for over a year to make a point, and they said, God told me to lie here facing this direction for a whole year. Or you look at the ones who go and marry a prostitute or things of this nature that are spectacular in the sense that they're sensational. They're sensational. Sensationalism is not an argument against the veracity of something. You're using it as if it is, but I'm saying people with a true message could use that just as much as people with a bad message.
That's my point.
And so, well,
anyone can use it. So how do you validate it? That's my point.
You validate it on the merits. You go into the merits, and yes, one of the merits is that conditionalism is a valid part of both the Bible and of any other prophet. So I can't deny her based on she said this and it didn't happen. It doesn't affect me because the Bible has things that were said and didn't happen. I can go through all of the best arguments against Ellen White and find the same thing in the Bible. So what I'm saying is that she is no different in.
Here's the difference. Here's the difference. Ellen White, they're claiming these things to be real events. When you look at some of the things that may or may not have happened in the counterpart you're referring to, sometimes you then look at it in the Bible as a parable, an analogy, metaphor.
Yeah.
Did Joshua stop the sun in the sky? If we found out that was just showmanship, and I'm being kind to the word showmanship, you don't do a tour. I've done tours where you're playing 21 nights in a row, and you get up and go, how are you, everybody? And great to be here, regardless of your day.
Yes.
You're putting your best foot forward. You're finding everything positive. And sometimes these stories in the Bible that may seem to have not come true are just metaphors. And when you see it that way and you see the context of it, it makes sense. But in Ellen White's case, there's no room for that to be a metaphor. So that's out of the picture. The only answer is God changed his mind. Okay, fair enough. Or it's conditional. But in the making of that, one needs to establish exactly as you have. And that's why I'd come along to your churches and I'd listen to your message and I'd be great because you're good at setting the scene.
I've seen you sometimes watch my sermons.
Yeah. And I love it because I know you set the scene and I understand where you're at.
Yeah.
But people don't come along to Border Church and they're just off the street and you're telling them a vision about, do you know what, you guys that are sitting right here now, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And they go, whoa, I'm coming into the church because you already infuse this broader picture. People in retrospect find things that Ellen White has infused the broader picture. But think of that moment where people are there in the room and God is telling her, my angel is showing me that some of you are not going to make it, but some of you will be here to receive the Lord return. Now, 2,000 years later, when people read that, they can go, oh, it was just a metaphor. Okay, fine. But she was not claiming that in her message at that point. This was a serious, intentional, God is giving this message to create a response.
Yeah.
I don't find that in any of the biblical writers unless they've already made it clear that it's conditional and unless they've already given it great scope for it to be a metaphor.
Yeah, so I'm not even going the metaphor route for those visions.
No, I know.
And we would have to go through them one at a time. I
I'm
just wanted
saying
to,
the
can I just
Bible
comment,
ones could be,
can I
though.
just comment on the commenters? Like the first
Well,
hour.
just leave them for 1 second,
No,
because this
I
is
just
important. I don't want to
yeah.
be distracted from
Okay,
it.
okay, fine. My theology allows for conditionalism in the Bible. Some people have said in the comments, you know, like
Why
where
didn't
did
hers, when she was making those claims and those visions in the
she has
moment?
a statement? No, she has a statement. I think it might be in Great Controversy, though I can't like. Don't hold me to that. Where she says all the promises and threatenings of God are alike conditional. It's in her theology too.
So when
All the
she's tearing
promises.
down Kellogg, God told me this, she's writing it in public, tearing him down. Turns out
So the
later it
Kellogg
wasn't.
file.
Turns out later
So
it wasn't true. You can't say that this person. This is from God
there are
into
things that
me
Kellogg
into a
denied.
testimony.
There are things that Kellogg denied that actually were like they are demonstrably true. So she said it, he denied it. The facts are in her.
And there's things that she said that turned out not to be true, that she
Well,
claimed were from God.
okay, there are things that are ambiguous and there's no evidence, and there are things that may not be, but again, you could still go with the
Just
conditionalism.
seems convenient to be able to do
Well,
whatever you want, and if it turns out not to be accurate, I mean, he lost so much reputation over this, but it turned out not to be accurate. Oh, well, that's conditional. It just
he
seems
lost
convenient, and
reputation within the church.
I don't think you as a person would ever do what she did. I think you're honourable enough to make sure that you create an environment that
Well,
demonstrates your full way of thinking at things. So when people hear you speak, they know where it's nestled. But those moments where she's writing letters naming him, claiming these things are from God that turn out later to not be true, I find that a bit convenient or culpable.
okay. So a lot of the ones that turn out not to be true, or people have said that they're just he said, she said. There are a lot of the claims that he
You only need
rejects.
one to be true, according to the Bible.
Unless there was things mitigating circumstances. You'd have to go through and show me one that is absolutely solidly not just on his say, because
So if
this
I
is the.
do, will you admit she was culpable in that situation?
Let's see it. Because what I find that people do is they take and treat him as authoritative to debunk her, whereas he is just stating his own words. I've gone through, like, I mean, the Kellogg file. I mean, I came across that in 2005, and it, you know, I was like, initially, you know, I'm just in 2005, I'm just 20 years old, sort of thing. You know, I'm 22 years old, and I was shocked. But then I go through it detail and I'm like, well, a lot of this is just his say so. You know, I'm talking about the interview that he did with those two gentlemen who came and visit. That's the Kellogg file. That's his interview that is often touted in this way. I I've looked into a lot more of the context of this. Some of the things that he denied, I have been able to validate that she was right. So I can't just take his word against it, because there's, you know, I can't cross-examine him. But it's like this is the odd thing, that people are treating him as prophetically infallible in his rejection of her statements based on only his statements.
Well,
So if you were to
I'll
find
look into
something,
that. I'll look into that, and we'll get you back. And I only need
okay,
one example to prove that
only,
she was wrong, and you'll admit that maybe she was culpable.
yeah.
I think at the very least, it's I like what
Well,
I'm
I will
gathering.
look at
What
it
I'm
and go,
gathering from what you've said today
yeah.
about all of Ellen White, all of the Bible prophecies, is that to bring in the conditional card is convenient. And it just opens the floodgates for everybody to go, all right, I've got a prophetic vision coming in, and to build up an audience with it. Oh, well, that was conditional. It's
Now
just
you know why I don't even bother with her writings, because it's just too much. I mean, I've got enough to leave me happy and satiated with studying the Bible for the rest of my life. You know, I don't have these conversations. Um, I find it interesting that the first hour, all the comments were positive. 95% were positive towards me, and then as soon as I start saying, "Hang on, I'm
Defending the
positively
church.
inclined towards her,"
What
I'm being called a member of a cult. Sorry, Jimmy James. I'm not a part of the
and
cult.
what
I'm
what
actually
I'm
kicked out
what
of it.
I'm wanting to just say to the
What I want
audience.
to say is that there's a level of animus
Yeah,
on
and
the
what I
side of those who have rejected her writings, where I believe that rationality is not necessarily a strong point of those who reject, as much as those who are probably, the sycophants for Ellen White. And I wouldn't place myself as a sycophant.
and what I'm hoping to see, like you and I are friends, and
Yes.
we've been here many times before, where we'll
Yeah.
have a no, I don't think we don't agree, and we're fine with that. And to me, this is an example of SDAQ&A channel working. This is where we have the dialogue. Everyone, I don't mind that people are getting upset or not getting
Oh
upset or
no,
supportive or not,
I
and I know
just
you
find
don't
it
either.
I just find it sociologically interesting that one minute I'm considered to be in their camp, and the next minute I'm like, I'm not even believing in the God of Christianity according to Cindy Lou. I mean, like
And
it's odd that these same pronouncements. I mean, like that. I haven't said anything about equating
here's
Ellen
the
White with
reason. Here's
the
the
Holy Spirit.
reason that people are reacting like that.
Yeah.
Is because they never have been given an opportunity to chat with Adventist apologists unscripted. So you're giving them that opportunity, and
Yes.
because of past hurts and everything, sure, there might be some feelings coming through, but I validate. No, I understand their
Mm,
response because I feel it in myself. Um, where as soon as you ask a question of an apologist,
mm.
and I've seen it this week in responses to my 7 questions video.
Seven questions. Yeah.
They're immediately upset, easily hurt, or triggered. Oh, why are you making this such a selfish thing? And you just get frustrated. So
Yeah.
what's happening is you're coming on
Yes.
unscripted, and people are almost relieved that they get to just say stuff. So my theory is that if these conversations persist, this kind of conversation is eventually there's going to be a more civil kind of
I
way.
would
And
hope
I've
so.
seen it happening. I've seen it happening like this, particularly in SDA Q&A. There are
Mm.
people here who are way more open to dialogue now than they have been in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I'm just talking about the ones that come up and say, like different Christ 100%. I'm like, I haven't even talked about what I believe about Christ, and I'm getting judged in that same way. And I think
Mm.
we need to, like, the rhetoric has to be lowered on both sides for
Yeah.
that civility to come in.
Yeah. Well,
I
what
I
needs to
think.
happen is not lowered. The Adventist apologist needs to have the rhetoric. They
Oh
just
well, I mean,
don't.
I'm more than happy. I'm not triggered by someone saying that I don't believe in Jesus. That's more of those sort of statements are more of an indictment against the judgmentalism of the person making them than on
Mm.
me. It doesn't, like, I know in whom I believe.
Why
I've
do you think Adventist apologists are particularly sensitive? Like I was the same. Honestly, if people question me,
lack of
I was in
preparedness.
SDA Fight Club. I think that's what it's called. And people were really having a go at me based on what they thought because I was still an Adventist at the time. And I had some massive pushback, and I was triggered by it quite easily. Now people, it's less triggering to me, but I get it from all sides. But my point is that I've had robust conversations with Anglicans and Uniting Church and Baptists, and it doesn't just jump into, oh, you've hurt my feelings and ad hominem attack replies like it does with Adventists. Like,
Yeah.
why? Just sociologically speaking, you mentioned that word before. You've had a lot of this kind of experience. Why are Adventists so easily, put on the back foot?
Well, I think because, and this is the issue. I maintain that it's not Ellen White, it's how Adventists treat her is the real problem. And so because they have built her up to be more than what she is, and I've even had people accusing me of equating her with scripture. That's not what I do at all. Like, I don't use her in my ministry. I don't even read her for devotion. I've got so much to get out of the Bible that I don't have time for it. But Adventists have misused her, and they've been their own worst enemy. So they've built her up to a place where it can't be sustained, because she never intended to be in that place herself. I think of, the people who have problems with the Bradford books, like Prophets Are Human and stuff like that. He came under such attack for some of that stuff, which
Yeah.
which was not warranted. I mean, there's reasons to disagree with Bradford on other matters, but not necessarily that idea of bringing more. And that's why the dissemination of the unpublished materials and pushing for that and basically forcing their hand was helpful, because we can see a fuller picture of who she is.
If
But
people get to know you, these are the great things that I find really refreshing about you. You're the guy that is at the forefront of making sure this material is out there, not hidden.
Yeah, because all things that are in darkness should be brought to light. That's what we read in the Bible. And so, I don't have a problem with Stephen Daly writing his book, coming with the same material, with his methodology, and coming to a different conclusion. That's what's going to happen anyway. That's what happened with Walter Ray and the stuff that was published. What we need to be able to talk between the Walter Rays and the Steve Dalys and the people who are on the other side of the spectrum. Now, you said, why are they sensitive? I think it's because they built her up to be more than what she claimed. In the mythos of Ellen White doesn't sustain the reality. The mythos that's been attached to her.
That's what Prescott was saying. As Prescott was saying in 1919, that
and
predicting this would happen, and it's happening.
It is. And number two, because of the lack of preparedness of people to talk about it, they're not prepared, because of they're under the word cult can be used in this sense. They're under the cult or the mythos, the legend of Ellen White, and they're not really steeped in who she actually was. They've got the hopeful view, or the tell the world view of this of her, versus this is a person who struggled with things. She had struggles with as a person who likes to eat, as a foodie. I love the idea that Ellen White struggled with her appetite, and it wasn't just it's not just me. It doesn't bother me that she continued eating things after she was trying not to. I mean, because that's what I do. Because I go, I probably shouldn't be having so much sugar, but that cake looks great. It's a different struggle. It's the sugar versus refined processed sugar versus non. But to me, it's real. It's and I see that same thing. I don't see the deification of the of the prophets in the Bible in the same way. But people who do take that view, they a better equivalent is Muhammad, to give to tell the truth. A better equivalent is you've got the Quran and what he did, and then you've got the Hadiths, and the Hadiths are they're the embellishments of who Muhammad is. And we have Adventist Hadiths, in the sense of we've got this cultic view that can't be sustained, it can't be defended, it can't be. And then there's the on the side of the people who are anti-Adventist, anti-Ellen White, the emotion has been caught up in this, because the judging of people based on misunderstanding, misusing of her writings, has led to people going out there with such pain and trauma, spiritual abuse, that when someone like me comes and just says, I'm positively inclined to her, they're like, you're a cultist, you don't believe in Jesus. I'm like, you have no idea to be able to make that judgment. You're actually doing the same thing people did to you. And so hurt people. That's why I'm not triggered by it. I don't bother. But we need to be able to have these conversations on the level of the rationality. Sweep away the legend on both sides. The legend of what what people have built her up to be, or built her up on both sides. So built her up to be this kind of demigod status, versus those who've built her up to be, Satan incarnate or Satan's mistress or whatever, the people who do it on the other side. Let's have some rational conversation.
What evidence would you accept if presented and validated would make you see her as someone that didn't have messages from God?
Okay, so the closest would be the things that like you're pressing the right way, things that she said that didn't, like, that were not true, and so that's in the general direction, but with the caveat that it doesn't come into something which would also make me throw out the Bible. If so the conditional things, if I can see conditionality, and I'm gonna try to see whether there's a way to understand, because I've been, again, I have been touched towards Jesus by things in her writings in the past. I don't read them anymore, but I've read the Conflict of the Ages series, and I see a picture of Jesus that is beautiful, that is love inspiring, and love producing. Okay, so and it's the same Jesus I've seen in the Bible. So for me, I would have to, I would be going, okay, I'm going to give it an attempt to defend this. But if there was something that defied attempts and didn't do damage to the way I see the scriptures, which I am 100% sold on, then that would be something that I would consider. So something that she says, less about the future, but about the past, or about something that she said about the past that was not true or not accurate.
What, and just as an aside, what prophet would you point to that has made a claim that didn't come true? Or are you saying there are some that are, but they were conditional?
Okay, so I mean, like the quickest one to go to is Jonah. Okay, so Jonah, but that one's the conditionality is explained in the story, so it's you see it not
Well,
only
that's a difference there then in the food for worms. She didn't explain the conditionality in the.
Okay, I'm just saying that one is explained. That one is totally explained. But then you have the vast majority of. Okay, I can't even. I probably have. I can't say majority. There's a lot of stuff in Isaiah, in the minor prophets that spoke of, for example, Ezekiel, the temple that's described there, and Gog and Magog that's discussed. That the temple would be rebuilt, and Gog and Magog will come and surround the temple. Well, Magog is not a people anymore. There is no people of Magog. That can't ever come true in a literal sense. But Magog did exist in the time of Ezekiel.
So how do you defend that?
So there's the principle of, I see a conditionality in Daniel chapter 9, for example. So in Daniel chapter 9, we have a vision. We have a prophecy given audibly to Daniel that 70 weeks are determined or cut off for your people. And then there's 6 KPIs that they are to accomplish. I call them KPIs, to do these things within that 70-week period. And I believe that a lot of prophecies regarding Israel are conditional on the people of God being bloodline Jews, bloodline Hebrews, bloodline Israelites, with the potential of grafting in under that. But then things take a change and a shift to an anti-type of Israel, and we see this in Romans chapters 9 through to 11. And so therefore, when we look at Revelation co-opts the Gog and Magog, and it projects it into a more global sphere, a global sense in its prophecy in the book of Revelation. So this is not just the only time that happens. Revelation periodically uses Old Testament prophets from that period and pushes them into a global sense, because the prophecy was originally made to a people that have failed their condition of their prophecy. Now that's that idea of conditionality is determined through studying the sense of Scripture, not like explicitly like in Jonah.
In the actual,
Yeah,
yeah.
not in
So,
the text.
and that's what you're saying with food for worms. She didn't make that conditionality apparent in the actual vision on the day, as
Yeah.
she was weaponizing it as a call to join us. And it was in all her other statements about
It
last
was in other
generation
statements, and
theology.
it's in the general tenet of her underlying theology, which I
Do you,
believe is in line with a high view of open theism.
does it concern you that very placing a condition on it, if you guys had been better prepared, he would have returned, that then lends itself to last generation theology?
Yeah, someone did bring up LGT, and that's LGT is its own issue. LGT it has a problem with its understanding of sin and righteousness. I think LGT it's very legalistic, and so because of
It
its
isn't
definition of
her
sin,
saying, "Look, if you'd been a better Adventist, Jesus would have returned by now." Isn't that a bit legalistic?
well, you see that very similar sense in the whole history of Israel, like the literal Israel, like the bloodline Israel. You see,
Which
there were
was
certain things.
legalistic.
Sorry.
Which was legalistic.
Look, I just did a sermon on this about the covenants, the two covenants, and I differ with some of your mainstays on this program. If you ever want me to do something like a gospel presentation on the covenants,
Mm.
the covenants, the old covenant and the new covenant are both important. There's glory in both of them, Paul said. The old covenant's glorious, the new covenant's glorious. It's the transitioning that we need to go from the old covenant to the new covenant, and I see the covenants as concurrent, not consecutive in terms of history. So yes, there's legalism then, there's legalism now. There was the new covenant experience then, and there's the new covenant experience now. I think it's always been available, and I don't believe in the last generation theology based on a definition of sin, which sin is an act.
How though is Ellen White's claim that the return didn't happen because people weren't fully following the three angels' message and the Adventist teachings, therefore Jesus doesn't return? How is that claim? How can you tease apart that being seen as very legalistic and it not being legalistic?
Well, the three angels' messages are like start with the eternal gospel to the kingdom, to the world, to every tribe and
You were
nation,
saying
etc.
about action. So she's saying there's actions that you
Well,
didn't
it fits.
do,
Her
that
statement
therefore
fits
Christ
with
didn't turn back. How is that
24.
not legalistic?
Matthew 24:14 tells us that this gospel of the kingdom must be preached in all the world as a witness. So not just preached, but lived, and have witnesses, people who are living embodiments of it. Not perfect, but people who embody the connection with God that comes through a relationship forged with the Holy Spirit and baptism of the Holy Spirit. That must be go to all the world as a witness, and then the end will come. I don't see her saying anything different in that sense. That if Adventists were to fully embrace the three angels' messages, they would not be arguing about them and what they mean. They would be out there sharing with the world. In her lifetime, when things like the daily came up, the daily, what is the daily? Her thing, and there was a big battle between Daniels and Prescott on one hand, and F.C. Gilbert and those guys on the other hand, the Andreasen and all those guys. When this became a massive issue, she said, "Get out in the cities and do some evangelizing and get back to what's important." Her passion was for the gospel to reach the world, not for arguments to happen and for us to become, more and more like literal Israel in the sense that the you can get three rabbis in a room and come away with four different opinions. That's what Adventism was devolving
Isn't
into.
it interesting though that, like, I'm sure the Lord was looking down on people reading Matthew's writing there and watching how people were interpreting it in legalistic ways, which they did.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that you'd think Jesus goes, "I'm coming back soon now. I've started my new investigative judgment in October 22. welcome the day today, and for our brothers and sisters in the States tomorrow, you'd think, I'm coming imminently.
Yeah.
I'm passing on a message of clarity for these end times.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that this person he chose has contributed to as much, if not more, convolution, misunderstanding, confusion than Matthew's statements did demonstrably to a vast number of people as well? You think Jesus would have gone, it's going to be different this time. I'm going to pick a messenger, and they're going to get it so clear that this last day message will be so clear that I'll be able to bring about this imminent return. And yet the Adventist October 22 message that eventually formed 20 years later
Yeah.
is one of the most confusing paths to meaning, purpose, and clarity and understanding of the gospel. You yourself can't even use it in your church because of the confusion that arises from it. If it's so special, last days, here comes Jesus, sends the message to this person's ear to share to us.
Mm.
Why can a pastor go, I can't even use her in my church because it creates so much confusion?
Well, okay. Can I'll answer two things there. I'll answer that part of not being able to use it in a second. But you've got the so I said before that if we had just one book, whether it's James or Romans or Galatians or, just choose any book of the Bible, and that's all that we had from God, we'd be arguing just as much over that. It's not a problem it's not a problem with the inspiration. It's the problem with us. It's the problem with how we approach, how we read.
But isn't October 22 a special time? Jesus is saying, right, time for all that end now.
There's all this confusion, right?
Yeah.
With regards to her writing.
As much as always revealing we are human, and she didn't grasp his message enough to make it clear.
Forget her and Adventism exists for a moment.
Yeah.
How many denominations are there that have different views based on the same Bible?
This is my point. Jesus was to choose someone for the end time to convey a clearer message.
Well, I have
we're in exactly the same position as if Adventism was here or not.
I don't think he was. I don't read the Bible seeing the prophecy that he's to choose someone.
Well, doesn't the Adventist Church, aren't they commandment keeping people who have the spirit of prophecy manifested in Ellen G. White?
Joel 2 says prophets. Okay, your young men, your young women, your old men.
Well, why didn't he choose prophets and multiple people for Adventism's last special message?
I don't think that we've been open to. I don't think Adventism has been open to it.
So therefore, it has failed. It is as confusing 180 years later as it ever was. Why? And that's surely, if there's an imminent return and Christ preparing a people for that imminent return message to be told to the world, why has it demonstrably been one of the most confusing denominations in existence?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's one of the most confusing denominations in existence. Again,
or as confusing as everyone else.
I think that's confirmation bias by being in proximity to it.
No, I'm just saying there's been we're all humans. No one's conveying a simple message.
Well, look, I mean, I think that, and this is why I don't use it, is because, when I come to share with people, I believe that I'm more obedient to Ellen White than most Adventists, because she herself pointed people to go back to the Bible. Her words were, if you studied the Bible, you wouldn't have needed me. She says in one occasion, she says, don't you dare, like she's scolding people, don't you dare say Mrs. White says, until you can obey what the Bible says. And so I find all of these, it's not until her later years where she started to be quoted in preaching in her day. For example, after she was sent to Australia, you can see the sermons in the General Conference Daily Bulletin, or the General Conference Bulletin, and they would the transcription of the sermon would be in the bulletin, and they're quoting her writings. And I think that's when she started to be placed on that level. I don't see it as much after she came back here. I think that was one of the reasons she was rebuking people when she got back. She rebuked people on her return from Australia, seeing what they were doing, saying, don't you dare. I'm talking even the people who I would consider mentors in my life, like David Ashrick. I used to have problems with him quoting her from the pulpit. I think that she should have devotional status at best, you know. But her whole point was go back to the Bible. I believe that if we were to return to that, a lot of this confusion would go away, because the amount that the Bible has is this much. The amount of writings, the corpus of her extant writings is like so far and beyond that. I mean, people get caught up over what Paul said in Ephesians versus what James said, or sorry, what Paul said in Galatians and versus what James said. I mean, like, that people get caught up even what Paul said in one letter versus what Paul said in another letter, let alone, you know, what have we got? 70 years almost of her writings, you know, 60 something years of her writings. There's bound to be things that are said in different contexts and different. I just think away with it. Away with.
And I agree. But I'm saying, if Jesus had a mission to raise up a special people for the end times who aren't even following her guidance anyway on so many levels, is there a time where we have to say, this denomination, it has failed, and it is just like every other single
You won't get any
thing?
argument on that. Has Adventism failed? I mean, I'm a person who's persona non grata for in perpetuity at this point from Adventism. That is not grace. That is not love. That is not Jesus.
Yeah.
Have they failed? Yes. As a whole, the fact that we're still here and that we're saying, you know, Happy Disappointment Day 180 years later is a travesty upon the mission that they've had. So yes, they've failed. Yes, they've failed. But so have non-Adventists. You know, like I find it hard to go.
Oh yeah, I don't. I'm
pointing at them.
My difference with you and I is that everybody has failed. Adventists, stop trying to defend yourself. You have failed. It's over. Goodbye. You're just as bad as everybody else. Stop claiming to be a special, unique movement for these last days. You're not. It's over.
Well, I mean,
be a cultural Adventist, be a movement, have ADRA, have your churches and have your education systems and wonderful hospitals, have all of that, great, but don't view yourself as unique anymore.
I think there are distinctively positive things within the theology of Advent, within the unique things of Adventism. I find the sanctuary message to be and by sanctuary message, I know that's a buzzword and it's going to trigger a whole bunch of people saying that I'm a Old Testament legalist. No, the way that God has taught us through the sanctuary. My favorite book on the sanctuary has nothing to do with Ellen White as much as anything. It's by Leslie Harding, you know, with Jesus in his sanctuary, and he points out Jesus all the way through. I love that sort of stuff, and it's absent from other areas. I believe that you can't find. I mean, the Torah, the Torah is beautiful. Adventists began to make moves towards exploring that until they got caught up in legalism. I recently attended a Feast of Tabernacles, one of the days of the Feast of Tabernacles, with other churches in this area, and it was a beautiful celebration. These are Pentecostals mostly, and you know, we're worshiping, waving palm fronds and all this sort of stuff. I find nothing wrong with that. I think that the legalism is when we judge each other. Legalism happens on each side of the matter, and it's ironically just as much on the antinomian side of things as it is on the side of things where people are saying you must do this, you ought to do this to be saved.
And therefore, it doesn't matter if Adventism's got some unique little sanctuary doctrine that's pearly white and sparkles. It's like having a 250 horsepower Yamaha, you know, speedboat engine on your 2-meter dinghy. It doesn't matter if you can no longer make a claim of remnant speciality in light of what you're saying. Like Peter.
No, I disagree. So I disagree, and now again I'll get the ire of the cult. You know, cult claims that I'm a cultist, but playing, you know, advocate here of the other side.
But you said before it's failed.
Well, Israel could be considered to have been like Israel failed. Israel failed. But that doesn't mean it wasn't called in the first place. That doesn't mean it wasn't according to God's plan in the first place,
No,
even though it
I
failed.
agree. Doesn't
So
mean you're not
therefore,
called,
so
doesn't mean
therefore,
you're
the
not
failure of
valid, doesn't mean you
Adventism,
have great things to offer. I'm
yeah,
just saying Adventism's claim of a unique last day message and people for these end times,
the mess. No, so
that can't stand.
here's what I would say. I look. The message of Adventism has not failed. The institutionalism of Adventism has failed. I believe that as a institution it has failed, but the message I do not fault. The message, and there are people, there are
Well, that's all
individuals,
wrapped up in the validity
there are
of
wonderful
Ellen
people who
White's.
are not caught up in the politics of Adventism, who I know, and some of them have been, commenting on the wall here today, and in the positive side of things, there are people who I look at and I go, I see Jesus in that person. The way that they function. I'm talking
We're
about
not
people,
talking about
and
the
people I don't
individuals, we're
agree
talking
with
about the
100%.
movement. We're
Like, for
talking about the
example, I don't
movement.
agree with Eugene Pruitt. Pastor Eugene Pruitt. He's an evangelist in Bangladesh, and I don't agree with him on women's ordination and several other things too. Okay, I'm pro women's ordination. My wife and I are getting ordained by Southern Cross Association of Churches this coming Saturday, and so my wife is being ordained as a pastor. I have no problem with women's ordination, but I disagree with Eugene Pruitt. But I see him as a wonderful man of God who lives the message that he knows. He is open and welcoming to people of different ideas to himself. Amazing.
But they're all
Conrad
just
Vine.
like
Conrad Vine.
they're all just standards, theological debates, non-salvific issues. I'm trying to tease out this notion of Adventism having a special core message that Jesus thought was so important to get out to the world. It wasn't ordination, it wasn't certain other things, but he had apparently so massive that he went from one phase to another phase, so massive that he had to breathe it into this denomination and call it the remnant and the commandment keeping people that had the spirit of prophecy with a special message. Regardless of if you think it's because we've done it wrong or they've misinterpreted it wrong, just looking out from here to there, it has failed. Therefore, what does God do with that? Does he start something different? Does he try and build up the ramshackle sort of things and build it up again? Or
so let's take a couple of the things of Adventism that were brought back into the forefront after 1844. Let's take the state of the dead. The state of the dead, the conditional or immortality. That one is, and soul sleep and stuff like that. You had a person on. I haven't watched it yet. Were they pro or anti soul sleep? I haven't seen it. Anti. Okay. Well, the idea of soul sleep, the idea of conditional immortality, annihilationism, that has become a kind of a counter movement within Christendom in general. Like the number of proponents now of conditional immortality is.
But these things aren't the salvific special thing for end times.
No, but they tell us about who God is. Like, is God a cruel person who's going to punish people forever and ever and ever, or is he a person who is someone that we can see is actually a God of love?
And they're all the Protestant notions and the good things from the Bible. Peter Mashenko writes, the question of the authority and validity of Ellen White's visions and her writings, etc., is so fraught that I, like Brendan, find it simpler and easier to focus on the Bible alone. And I'm saying, good, focus on the Bible alone.
And that's fine. I don't see Ellen White being the message.
There's a question that Mark Anthony raised. What was Ellen G. White's contribution that makes her indispensable to Christianity? And I'm trying to say is, what is Adventism that Jesus started, right? Did Jesus start Adventism? Seventh-day Adventist Church? Was that an intentional beginning founded by Jesus?
I believe that it was his will that it came into existence, yes.
Yeah. So now we just turn it back into the wonderful writings of the Bible. We find nothing indispensable that Ellen White has contributed to this thing. How is it different to any other good movement out there that follows the Bible and the Bible alone. I'm trying to find out what is this special thing that Adventism has that has manifested itself into actuality.
So if I was to be perfectly honest, Adventism, even the sanctuary message, none of it's new. None of it's new. It was a repackaging of what had been lost through the medieval times, of what I think is closest to apostolic Christianity, like closest to apostolic Christianity in its infancy, with the added urgency. It was about the message and mission. It's the message and mission, and with the added urgency of Jesus is like everything is now accomplished that needs to be accomplished. Now it's just on when this gospel gets everywhere and all decisions are made. That's how I have seen it, and
So
that's
when
just as true today now.
When Jesus founded the Adventist Church in essentially October 22, day after 1844, when he founded that movement,
Before then, with the movement of the Millerites,
how successful has this movement been? And let's answer Mark's question: what was Ellen White's contribution that makes her indispensable to Christianity?
I think it's what makes her just. I think that everyone is indispensable to Christianity. God wants all of us on board, and so I don't see this whole isolating Ellen White according to she had a pastoral role in nurturing a church that was formed. She didn't found Adventism. There's not a single belief of Adventism that is cardinally, other than that, there's probably the emphasis on health is probably the closest you could come to something that she is pivotally responsible for in terms of its inception. But everything else is either existed before in terms of other Adventists in that time period, or she just didn't start it. So indispensability was, she was there as a nurturer. She was there to nurture a church that was a movement that was beginning, not a church even, just a movement. They were always supposed to just be a movement.
And she was chosen by God to be that nurturer?
Sure, yeah. I don't see a problem with that. She might not have been the only one. I don't see, I don't look at Adventist beginnings and go, there's only one prophet. I see the gift of prophecy, obviously in people like Foy and what was the other one? Foss. I see two other prophets at least.
Yeah, Foss and
I see other people. I see, like Joan
Rice, Anna Rice.
Wagner said he had a vision. So a person having a prophetic, like a prophet, someone who has a gift of is given the gift of prophecy doesn't always act in the function of a prophet. I mean, this is something that has been talked about a lot. I think that some people can be a prophet for a moment. Others can be prophets for a lifetime. Whatever God's calling is, I see prophets. I see apostles in the Adventist Church. I mean, the work that J. and Andrews did in Europe is apostolic. The type of work that he did. James White had an apostolic unction, as I look at it. But that doesn't mean I can't look at other groups that were in that same period and go, these people also had apostolic unction within the context that they had. I think that God is bigger than one movement. Even if he founds it, even if he's like, I'm doing this here because I want to do this here, doesn't mean, I mean, we see that. The Millerites, all the attention is on the Millerites in the lead up to 1844. But he had Joseph Wolff in Europe, Asia, Africa. He had, he had a Jesuit, with Manuel de la Cunza, who was writing. He had Edward Irving in England. He had, I forget the name of the guy in Australia, in South Australia. He had people around the place. God is bigger than one movement. He's bigger than one thing that he's doing, but it doesn't mean that he's not doing that thing as well. And so I see a God that is, the question about the indispensability of we're all indispensable. God is calling every single one of us to a work, and we are all to step up into that. And if we don't, then that's the sadder for the world, to not step up into the God-given gifting that we are called to. And I I would encourage every person here, stop focusing on whether she was called or not called. You are called. You are called to something. What are you doing? Are you using that calling? Are you squandering it to argue and call people names on Facebook because they differ from your experience, they differ from where you're at or your understanding? Are you judging people from your position on your journey, or are you stepping into a calling that God has for you? You're all indispensable, every one of you. And I would love to see a church that is enriched. I'm talking about a wider Christendom by all of you getting out and preaching. Maybe you don't like the three angels' messages, in terms of that title. Go and preach the everlasting gospel anyway. Maybe you don't like. Get out there. There's a lot more to be done than worrying about this. That's why Ellen White's on my shelf in my garage, not prominently out here, and not something that I've picked up in years.
And to some degree, like you said earlier, the church leadership and the wider state have created a myth and promoted that myth. We won't talk about it now, but I'd like to suggest that Ellen White contributed to the creation of that myth. And I think a lot of people that are upset are just frustrated that the Adventists, you've acted on your words. So this is not a criticism of you, because you've acted on that. You're literally living the life that you believe. What we and a lot of people watching get frustrated with is the many who stay and don't admit that Ellen White fueled it. It wasn't just the admin and the wider state. She fueled a lot of this stuff, and that was her humanity. That was her flawed nature. But she often called to God speaking to her, and using that, I think, at times inappropriately. But that's another discussion. And Cindy Lou has reminded us. I thought we were here to be discussing the treasure trove of goodies obtained. I'll come back to that, and we won't. I don't want to change the topic because I think it's really important. And I love how you and I talk about it. I think people get a really good, honest discussion from both of us when we talk about this stuff. So I definitely want to come back. We'll have you on again, that's for sure, and we'll be able to talk about other things. But back to the topic of today.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you think Steve Daly found there that weren't already available? Like you mentioned, Walter Ray, his whole book, The White Lie, based on a lot of stuff that was already in existence. What was it that Steve Daly found that was different in these hacked documents that you discovered?
Well, I can't speak for Steve, but what I can say is that when the things came out, and just to re-answer the question that Cindy Lou just put up, which was why did I go about obtaining the works, is because at that time I was very much steeped within the Adventist system, and I got frustrated by the idea that I could write anything about her whether it's in an essay or a blog post or anything that could be rendered redundant when more material comes out. I just wanted everything out there, and I wanted to be able to examine things for myself. So, that I wanted not just me but others. I wanted everyone to have that privilege. I wanted her will to be properly kept. And so that's that. When I come to the idea of what did people find? People found new things, no matter what their starting point was. Steve Daly found things that showed the flaws of her life because he was looking for them. The anti-Trinitarians found statements that appeared to back their idea, and the Trinitarians found things that appeared to back their view. People who were, fanatical about health found things that they could use to be more fanatical about health. People found what they were able to look for, because our tendency is to have those blinders on when we look. I can't claim to be perfect in that sense either. I found things that spoke to my confirmation biases as well. But I hope that over time I've read to go, what do these tell me in an objective sense about this person who lived, had an impact on the church in a guiding role. These are the things that I have had more, now. So you'd have to ask Steve what he got, but I'm sure he got stuff that, like you said that he's claimed that his impetus for writing his books was partly because of this trove of material that came out.
Yeah.
Well, people find what they what they're looking for at the first glance. Every one of us, me included.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay.
Kevin at Ellen White Reconsidered just wrote, did Steve Daly use the manuscripts? I find he condensed secondhand accusations in my, and I just answered him in the comments, but in my recent interview with him, he said he did read the actual manuscripts that you had revealed there, and he thanked you publicly for doing that.
Yeah.
So what about you then, whether it's biased or not? What things did you find that you were like, whoa, I didn't know that before?
At the time that I did the hacking, I was still I was still interested and fascinated on the Godhead, and I found statements that were incorporated into my understanding of her view of God, and they paint a picture that is neither. My understanding of Ellen White is that she doesn't fall into either the anti-Trinitarian category or the Trinitarian categories of most modelings that I've seen. I try to take a view of her writings that on that particular topic that include everything she wrote. What else did I find? I found statements that made me go, huh, she's quite a funny person sometimes, or she's, some of the diary entries made me go, oh, she's someone that I could, eat with, not someone that would be like, she's at the head table and everyone's looking at her as some special person. She's a person. She's a grandma. She's a mother. She's someone who enjoyed nature. Like, these are things that I started to find as I explored some of the writings. I found one statement that completely it's been a confusion to a lot of people. Like, there was this one statement where she appears to give the opposite view of the scapegoat to everything else she wrote. I'm sure you've come across that or had people come across that. That took me a little bit to understand what might be going on there. There was some interesting things, like, for example, I have written a hermeneutic. This was before I stopped having much to do with her. I wrote a hermeneutic article about the stenographic reports of her writings. Of her sermons. There was one speech she gave that there's no fewer than 5 separate stenographic reports of it. So that means that there was at least 3 people transcribing it as she spoke. One of them being Kellogg. So it was in that time where the Kellogg thing is boiling. So Kellogg's transcribing it. There's a secretary of hers transcribing it, and there seems to be someone from the GC transcribing it. And then there's 2 edited versions that come out. So there's there's the manuscript A, B, C, D. There's all of the different letters for the same manuscript number. And so that was a fascinating thing for me to look at. How did transcription happen and stenography happen in her day that could give such widely different readings between 3 people who were present? And it's that whole eyewitness issue.
And the confirmation bias.
And then the one that was, then the 2 that appeared to be very close to identical, that seemed to be the edited versions from the, her people coming back and sitting down and typing it up, and maybe she approved it. I don't know, but it was fascinating for me to look at that, and that's given me a different view of things that are stenographically recorded. I don't consider them to be as high on my level of what I would, if I was to be looking at her writings, I'd go, well, I'll take the things that she herself wrote or approved the editing of, versus something that might not 100% reflect what she said, because of these 5, the 3 that are very different. I actually presented like a table with paragraph by paragraph. Sometimes you got big chunks missing from some of them where they're not transcribing what happened, and then you can see the differences. Yeah, that one was fascinating. Like there's a lot more that you can do now that you have everything at your fingertips.
How
And
did you overcome your own confirmation bias?
you got to just be aware of it. I mean, like when we do science experiments, everyone has confirmation bias on everything. When we do a science experiment in grade 8, when I started doing science at high school, we were taught to set out and lay out our studies. Aim, hypothesis, apparatus, method, observations, conclusion, evaluation. That's the scientific method. I think we don't do that enough in our theology, where aim and hypothesis is where you say aim is what that's where I'm coming from. That's my intentionality in going into this, and hypothesis is what I believe I will find. If we lay it out transparently like that in theology and historical studies, the social sciences, then what we're doing is we're saying, I know what my confirmation bias is, and I'm going to allow what I read to speak into that. And if we do that, I think we'll have a lot fewer denominations in the world. We'll have a lot fewer. We're never going to eliminate entirely the differences that we have over things, but at least we'll go, I understand why there's a difference, rather than you're wrong and I'm right because I have a greater connection to Jesus than you do. And that's what it devolves into. When we have differences, it's like, well, I know I have a connection to Jesus and you disagree with me, therefore you mustn't have a connection to Jesus. I mean, we've seen it in the very comments here today. And I think if we are transparent about those cognitive biases by going, okay, what's my aim? What's my hypothesis? And then later on you can come back and go, did my hypothesis hold up? I've changed on many things because of being transparent in that way.
When we've chatted before about plagiarism, and if you define plagiarism, just off the top of my head, I know it was the same back in her day as it is now, the borrowing of someone else's ideas and passing them off as your own. That was the general understanding then. Let's forget the church's, was it Ramic, or let's forget his defense. He was a defense lawyer on behalf of the church, defending her, so of course he's going to come up with the conclusions he did.
Yeah.
Purely as that definition, when you realize that a vast number of her material, when you approach it, as you just said, that you're putting this confirmation bias into a category of, oh, I'm really aware of this, but when it's empirical data proves that she passed off many ideas of others, claiming they were her own. Even Fred Veltman, who did the 8-year study, came up with kind of your conclusions, but I want to reveal this, but I'm going to still believe in Ellen White. When confirmation bias is that strong, how can you be sure you're not being tricked?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm grateful for the work of people like Veltman and like Ray, who have pointed out her use of other sources, because it's exactly what I see in the Bible, the use of other sources. We see people, like we see Bible writers who are riffing off of. So, for example, the Isaiah 14, where it's talking about Hallel ben Shakar, Lucifer. Lucifer, son of the morning. A lot of work has been done on passages such as that, where they're like, Isaiah is writing in a corrective way against pagan ideas out there. You've got Hallel ben Shakar. Shakar was a pagan goddess, equivalent to Venus, the morning star. And then you've got, for example, the Zaphor, like the mountains of the north. This was a pagan location. You've got the work of people like Michael Heiser, which talk about the counsel of God, the divine counsel. These things have shown that the people who, the writings we have collected as scripture, were dependent and not in isolation to things that were in writing, whether it's in cuneiform or whatever around them. There's similarities between the Epic of Gilgamesh and differences, and the flood stories. I don't have a problem with borrowing. I don't have a problem with
Passing it off
Paul.
as your own is different to the prophets. They weren't passing it off as their own. And a second important point that Nikki Carlton raises, and that's an important one, they weren't passing it off as their own. And she was passing it off her own, and she was monetarily gaining from it. And a really interesting thing that Nikki Carlton just said that I haven't thought of before. It's not the same as Bible borrowing unless you put Ellen White on the same page as a biblical writer. So if if she's if she's
I disagree. I'm going to push back.
If she's a prophet, and you might be able to compare her to the Bible ones, but you're saying she's not necessarily a prophet.
No, I'm not even answering that question. I'm just saying, like, first of all, there's two things there, and I'm going to push back against Nikki and yourself on this. The writers of the Bible didn't say, oh, by the way, I'm currently engaging with the idea of such and such out here, or I'm currently engaging with that idea. Like, for example, Isaiah lifts it probably was Chronicles. Chronicles lifts a whole chapter out of Isaiah, because Chronicles was probably written or compiled afterwards.
But they weren't claiming it as their own, is what my point is.
They weren't acknowledging that they got it from somewhere else, though. They weren't acknowledging in every instance. There's no acknowledgement that they're getting it where they're getting it from. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, is you are using modern...
James was claiming that on Ellen White's behalf.
Right now...
Nothing she writes it's all from God.
The ethics of and practices of current research and usage of other things is vastly different today than it was even 100 years ago.
The Webster's Dictionary, plagiarism, borrowing others' material, claiming it's your own, is the same then and now.
And
it's actually a virtuous law and an ethical law that runs through our conscience. It doesn't even have to be defined by legal terms. And the prophets, they're not saying whether it was copied or not copied, but A, are you going to put Ellen White in the same category as them? If so, maybe you've got that argument. And B, if you don't, she was definitely claiming this as her own. And she herself, and James also said, these are not words, these are words direct from the throne of God. And what did James say? There was something he said that, and if they're not, then she's fake.
Okay. So, for example, let's go with Life of Paul, which is the one that's considered to be the most egregious of her borrowings. Okay. There is a large overlap of material, including the structure, between who she's said to have borrowed or stolen from and her own writing, because they're going to follow the same Life of Paul. I have seen and compared enough of the statements to go, okay, there is similarities here in language without it being of the nature of direct quoting. Some of those paraphrase.
But the chapters follow the same titles, the same similar titles.
Okay, and that's unavoidable because of the very fact that they're dealing with the same source material.
I think you're clutching at straws with that.
No, same source material.
She borrowed material, demonstrably so, and passed it off as her own.
And it didn't. And we're passing 21st century standards of source.
Connie Berenhausen said she wasn't passing the test of the times then, and she believed it so much so that she did what you did with this whole thing and settled out of court, took it off the shelves, stopped selling it,
and then she redid it as Acts of the Apostles
as it ran out of copyright way down the track.
What do you mean? No, the Acts of the Apostles. So she added more information.
She made it more distinctly less obviously copyrighted down the track.
Look.
I think by then Connie Berenhausen had gone bust or something anyway.
Yeah, I've seen so many people who... I've seen people lift my material in sermons. Like I know people watch my sermons and I hear exactly the same sort of... And they're not putting these exact same words. Actually, I have had someone do that. But And I was upset with them because of the standards that they did. They lifted my exact words and put it in their own document one time.
Mm.
But I don't have a problem with the fact that we influence each other. People are influenced by other people.
But
And
it was demonstrably shown in the 8-year study that she definitely crossed the line.
I don't know. No, I've seen that. I've read that whole study, and I don't think that she ethically.
Have you read the summary? Or have you read the whole study?
I've read through
One's
it's
2,000
multi-volumes.
words, one's 2 pages.
No, I've read through the study, and I've found sources that aren't even in Veltman for the same chapters that he was exploring. So because he only handpicked several like probably
15.
what was it, about 15 chapters throughout Desire of Ages.
Because of time.
Yeah, because of time. And I've found additional ones from that as well.
Yeah.
And I've also seen people using her. I've actually seen people using her, and I'm not talking Adventists. I've actually found people who've used her material, who've written after her, who have been influenced by her without crediting her. There are people. Yeah, I've found some.
I think that's wrong. They're passing off someone else's material, claiming it's their own, and she did that. There's just no doubt she did it.
There's an element of what, even today, there's an element like, so my wife has just finished a course in so this is something new that's coming up, and it's being wrestled with right now. My wife has just finished her bachelor degree in business, and in one of her last assessments, she handed in her assessments early because she was just done. She was like all over it, and she got an email which said, came out and said, for those who have submitted early, and it must be my wife and one other person, if you have used ChatGPT or other such AI, you are to declare it. Now, I know my wife didn't use it, and so she started to feel upset. Are they talking about me? Because initially, the first few months of ChatGPT, the first few semesters or terms, they were saying you're not allowed to use it. If we catch you using it, it's bad. And then they got to the point where they realized, oh, look, we can't unring this bell. At least declare it in your thing that you've used. But she didn't. She did not use it. It didn't even need it. It was not the sort of thing you would use ChatGPT or anything like that for. Anyway, we then took her assessment and ran it through a AI detector.
Right.
And we found that there was a percentage that was being detected as being AI written. And some of it was highlighted was quotes that she'd used. So it was detected.
I get what you're saying. It's impossible to avoid paraphrasing. Okay. It's impossible to avoid direct copying. It's impossible.
Exactly.
But you don't write book after book after book after book and have even your editors a bit concerned about it, where you're passing it off as your own material, and it's demonstrably more than just a small percentage.
And someone who is prolifically...
confirmation bias has got to be in full play to defend that. It's better to say she was wrong. That's inappropriate, unethical.
I still think, like, no, I not only think, I still am convinced that people who take this Walter Ray angle are utilizing 21st century or late 20th century standards and placing them back into her time when they are not valid. I think Veltman's study did defend that some of that it's not as overblown as, in terms of the standards of the day were not the same. Other people have written and shown that they were not the same standards. There are the life of Paul, I think, is going to be the most egregious, and I'm comfortable with the fact that she decided to take it out of print, take it off the shelves, as a precautionary method. I've seen that there's, like, it's not direct lifting of quotes. The best is, you can say, paraphrasing. When you read so many...
There's actually 2% verbatim copying in Desire Ages just in the 15 chapters. And 2%'s a lot.
Yeah, but when you do that 2%, when you look at that 2%, that 2% is not whole paragraph for paragraph. It's like it's phrases within sentences that are similar to phrases within sentences in the other source material.
Well, Veltman says there are 2% copied verbatim.
Yeah, no,
from other authors.
2%. No, he says 2% that is word for word agreeing in a word for word agreement. And so in your mind, you go, okay, out of 100 words, so let's say 1,000 words, then that 2% comes to 20. 20 words are the same. 20 words are the.
If you and I,
but there's no instance
on the book of the four Gospels.
Yeah.
And then we don't look at each other's material, guaranteed we're going to say some identical phrases. We're probably going to have the flow, same order. I get all that, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest she was going, here's this one that works better for me, I'll paraphrase it a bit, or she didn't. She'd get her secretaries too. Like, it just can't be denied.
That's interesting that you bring up the Gospels, because Matthew lifts from Mark. If you depends whether you take Markan or Matthean primacy, but one of them lifts from the other without attribution.
Yeah.
Luke at least attributes that he got it from other sources. So at least
there's
Luke,
lots of common ground understanding.
But he doesn't say who those sources
on. They were people reading it at that time. If you're going to put the contextual element to it, people were reading it at that time, going, "Yeah, we know that's from Isaiah. Of course, we know that's from here."
No. I'm talking about Matthew.
It's about you writing something and me writing something. It's going to be different. There's going to be words that appear to be lifted.
Ellen White Reconsidered just commented 91% of Mark is used in Matthew and Luke. And that's what I'm saying is that they used it without attribution, especially on Matthew's part. You got a loose attribution on Luke. He doesn't say, I got this from Mark. And I think that, I'm very desperate, Jimmy. I don't actually care what you think, but what I'm interested in is discussion. And I think we use false equivalency. And that's my biggest thing, is there's a false equivalency.
To compare Mark and copying 95% or whatever Kevin just said, you then have to place Ellen in that same kind of level of apostolic prophetic standing. And do you?
What do you mean?
Well, you can't use that argument. They copied, so therefore she can. You can only if she's the same standing as them.
No. Okay, so I'm not making the equivalency in that sense that she is canonical. I don't, and I think that there's prophets that are not canonical, and it's okay for that. No, I'm saying just purely on the standard of, if you go by her day, she did not transgress the ethics and standards of what constituted plagiarism in her day.
I think you could make an argument for modern times, post 1800 to the Bible times. I don't think you can make any distinction between the mid to late 1800s and now. The standard of, like, even James himself would be telling off people for copying her and them. In the Webster's dictionary, the plagiarism definition is the same as now.
Yes, but the plagiarism definition is not count. So the way that it's been overblown, like I'm saying, that 2% that you mentioned that Veltman brought up, there's not places where there's whole paragraphs lifted. The 2% is like this expression. So, for example, she uses expressions that impacted her in her copious reading of other things that she didn't even probably remember. I do it myself. I don't even know where I've got some things from, but I know that I'm like, I heard that somewhere and I've said it without attributing it. And it's just a turn of phrase. The 2% is a whole bunch of turns of phrases.
It's accidental. You're saying it's accidental verbatim copying, that 2%.
We do it all the time. I'm saying that
your claim is that she never paraphrased anything, passing it off as her own.
I'm saying she is not around to answer these questions.
You're saying that, in your opinion, she never paraphrased anything, passing it off as her own intentionally.
I've seen her credit sources in her writings, and I believe that if she was considering herself to be utilizing what is considered to be worthy of attribution, she would have attributed it.
So nothing to see here.
No, I'm just saying that we are using a different set of standards than what existed in her day. I'm saying that if it was today, she most certainly should have been having pages of footnotes and endnotes. If it was today, but it's not today.
Jennifer asks an interesting question. Jennifer Lynn Quick, why would Ellen need to borrow anybody else's words at all? Why didn't she just sit down and write what God told her? And I guess if God was aware of this potential hazard down the track, although he did think he was coming back within a few weeks, few months, maybe a few years, would he not have ensured that the wording was so genuinely different that no one could misconstrue her?
I'm thinking about the elder in Ecclesiastes, and what does he say? There's nothing new under the sun. You know, the only way she could have put things in a sense that didn't, there's only so many ways you can say some things, especially when the source material is the same.
Yeah.
There's only so many ways to say things, and I think that we've got to be aware of that as well. To the point where she would have had to have invented a new language, like Sindar and
Well,
something like Tolkien
in
did.
music all the time, just to support what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
It's
There's
like,
only so many ways you can put
if you're playing blues
progressions
music,
together.
Blues music,
Yeah.
it is impossible to release anything that someone listening couldn't say, hey, you've just copied B.B. King, or you've just copied such and such. It's impossible given the nature of the chord structure and the 12 notes you have access to.
Yeah.
So look, let's leave that for now. We keep going off sidetrack, but I love that. I'm loving this.
Well, these are important to you and your audience. These are questions, and I see that Cindy Lou's asked a few questions.
They spring from
Yeah.
this source material that you discovered. Is there anything there that's pertaining to the conversation and the topic?
Oh, look, there's a lot of I think we've missed so many things on the side, and I've been looking at it going,
incredible.
Look, I'm on Facebook at Brendan Paul Valiant. Like, that's, you can just find me Brendan. No, there's no other Brendan Paul Valiant. If you'd like to, I'm open to talking and discussing with anyone individually with the questions that we've unfortunately missed and will be lost when we close this, because I think
that's the sad thing. Yeah,
that's the sad thing. So if you've got a question that's burning and you want to hear what I've got to say, little old me, then I'm open to talking. As long, you can be disrespectful. It doesn't matter. It's just you'll fall lower on my priorities if you are. But I'm happy to talk to anyone and answer any of those things. There've been great questions there, and there's been not so great contributions. But
also over at Facebook, they stay there, and there's some
they stay there, and I've seen a few on Facebook that are good.
I'll just
Peter Mushenko did say that on Facebook he's interested to hear more about how the church treated Brendan. I think we did that a month and a bit ago.
Yes, we did. I saw that. Yeah, we've already done that one.
Might find the link for that one.
Yeah.
There's a lot by Nikki, and there's always a lot by Nikki on there. I'm keen to do a presentation on the covenants, just to give that alternative idea, which because I know she's very big on the covenants and she's very dispensational about the covenants. I would love
to do that in the Voice Life Fellowship, because that audience understands the Adventist to and froing of it.
Or the SDAQ&A church. That one did seem like
do it without relating anything to Adventism.
Yes. I wouldn't even do it. I could just do it as that's how I'd want to. I wouldn't want to bring up.
Right. Let's just do, to wrap up on this special, before it turns into actually October 22 in the USA. I wonder if it actually nearly is now. We might have crossed over. Those watching on the Eastern time zone.
No, I believe that it's
Eastern.
Oh no, it would no. So 12:30 we started. Wow, it's been a big one.
Yeah,
I'm
we've hit 3 hours.
I'm still hoping that I can beat Matthew Cortman's one day. No, I'm just kidding.
So we're only half an hour away from tipping into October 22 USA time on the eastern seaboard.
No, because when we started, one of the girls said that one of the ladies said that she was 9:30 her time in Eastern time. So I think we're in.
Oh, yeah, of course. That means we're 12:30.
Yeah, we're 12:30
Happy
now.
Great Disappointment Day, USA.
Happy Disappointment Day,
This
everyone.
moment where we're living in October 22 at exactly the same time.
Yep.
Woohoo! Hey, that was kind of unplanned.
Except for Pacific
Cool.
time, you guys have to wait.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Pacific time. Yeah.
And
You're
Mountain
you're
time and
you're the one still awake. Look, let's do some rapid fire little comments here
Yep.
from the audience, and if you feel the need to say anything, but most of them, let's just take them as comments. Jimmy James has written, I challenge each person to type in Ellen G. White, golden card, little wings, green cord, good old Enoch, chess and crackers. Is this a
checkers.
prophet of God? Oh, sorry.
Chess and crackers
I was
sounds like
thinking
a
it
good
sounds
afternoon.
awesome. I could have cheese and crackers
Yeah.
and play chess. Yeah, no, I've got a little bit of double vision going on. If people see me squinting, I guess I should go to the doctor and check that out. It's only been here in my brain for 6 weeks. People found whatever they needed. This is Dr. Ayres. Great to have you watching, Dr. Ayres. Love your work. People found whatever they needed because Ellen G. White was not consistent in her theories. She was all over the place with her plagiarism. So whatever you needed to validate your cause, you could find. Barb T. And I'm not reading these before. I'm just bringing ones onto the screen. Is it past the time of present truth where we can fly in airplanes without fearing that it was of Satan? That's a good one.
I don't know where that's coming from.
Cindy Lou writes, 1863 church. The menfolk didn't do squat without her. She was human, but acted more than human. Yeah,
Isn't that what we're talking about these days with transhumanism? No,
Yeah,
that's not related to that.
Different topic. Thank you, Brendan, for this interview. Really enjoying listening to you.
I'm glad it was a blessing, Mariposa.
And Marie writes, her work entailed more than that of a prophet. Jimmy James writes, so sad to hear people defending a prophet condemned by God himself.
I pray that every blessing on you, Jimmy. I just pray that you see the love of Jesus and live that out.
I've been getting into Michael Heiser or whatever, Heiser.
Yeah, Heiser, Michael Heiser. He's got some good material. I don't agree with everything, but some fascinating stuff.
Various numbers. 1981. And she is the end-time prophet replacing Jesus. Someone's talking about Jesuits. Andy Mack writes, I say you're stuck in a cult to an Adventist. Yes, sure, but you say I'm an apostate Protestant. What is the difference? That's a good one.
I'm considered an apostate Protestant these days. I'm not in the cult anymore.
And Jimmy supports my claim earlier that he speaks to J-Dubs and Mormons each week, and they say the exact same things in defense.
Do you speak to them or do you speak at them?
Jimmy, I'd love you to come on the program. I think we've talked about that maybe happening. Can we make that happen? Well, can you see some things there?
Look, there's some questions, but I mean, that'll just take us.
Rochelle puts here, that's not true because Ellen got mad about others using stuff without permission. That's true. The Israelites knew exactly where the quotations were from. Brendan, your argument is trash for a garbage false prophetess.
Blessings to you too, Schley.
And I think she made squillions. I agree with you, Marie. She made money off her books.
Actually, she died in debt.
That's little bit of a misnomer, though. That one.
No. This is. Can
clever.
we talk about that one just for a few minutes, just because it's relating to the original topic?
Yeah.
So, the way in which her trust was co-opted by the conference was because of the debt that she had. So she did have quite a substantial amount of debt at her passing. And if you read Gilbert Valentine's book, The Struggle for the Prophetic Heritage, it gives quite a lot of source material on how this happened. Thanks, Victor. And in that, what happened was the General Conference came in and said, we'll pay off the debts, but we're going to assume more editorial control over what gets released and what is done by this fledgling trust, because it wasn't yet the Ellen G. White Estate Incorporated. And so that was how they assumed control. They paid off her debts, paid off her estate, paid out her estate, and assumed control over the literary output from that point on. So assumed all copyright, all monies that would come to them. Basically, that's where the monopoly started. So it's just a fascinating part of this entire saga.
If I died now, I'd be considered dying in debt as well. But the reality is that in the living, there's enough to feed my family and get by, and I've got some assets. So, I'm sure that, they carefully distributed properties and houses to her family, and she had multiple staff, and she was living a high life, sucking away on those beautiful oysters every now and again. She lived in a very luxuriant kind of environment, and
She
very well
did
looked after, with big houses and staff and good food and properties all around the place to give to others. I think what happened is she died, in debt, make the money work for you, and then it consolidated and then began to make even more squillions afterwards.
No, I
now
think that is actually
the church or the White Estate must be absolutely rolling in it.
yeah. Look, the White Estate definitely now, but at her death, I've got to push back. No, that it's interesting.
But wouldn't you
Some
equate if I
Ellen White
die, I'd be
people,
in debt too? She didn't die without homes and properties. She died with equity.
and the equity, once all paid off, didn't come to the point where it was in the green. She was not in the green because she had
But that's
borrowed
how
against the
businesses
equity.
run. Businesses
She
run to look like they're not making much of a profit, so they can,
she had borrowed against equity in her properties to fund the work, and so when she died, those debts were greater than the equity, so that when it was all paid off and everything, and she had private loans. She had private loans even to the General Conference itself. They had to dismiss some of them, where she promised against books that she would write in the future.
Who are the beneficiaries now of the Ellen White Estate? Are they actual named people that are
So
making money from this? Is it a trust still?
in her will, it's implicit. It's not explicit. So you need to go to her other writings to see what she stated. I can actually bring this one up because it's one that I did anticipate that we might discuss. So her will, she states that I hereby give, devise, and bequeath to William C. White, Clarence C. Chrysler, Charles H. Jones, Arthur G. Daniels, and Frank M. Wilcox my general manuscript file and all indexes pertaining thereto, to have and to hold. So these are the trustees, not the beneficiaries. The said and real personal property until said trustees and their successors, upon the trust to enter into and upon and taking into and upon and take possession of the said real estate and said personal property, publishing and selling said books and manuscripts. So she left it to the trustees. So she's the trustor, leaving to the trustees. The question of who the beneficiaries is not implicit in the will, which is odd. Like her son is a trustee, not a beneficiary here. Willie. So if you come down,
so he was just getting paid as a trustee member, like a wage, like a super fund trust pays
salary. They can take a salary, but not like it's
and
not.
How much was the salary?
Well, I mean, the salary is determined by the board. Like
But you've got no written evidence of what the salary.
There's no written evidence of what that can be. Like, I mean, they could give themselves as much,
so
or as little.
They could do whatever they want, And
there is some ethical
my
limits.
suggestion is that anyone involved with Ellen White, her books, her trust, lived in luxury for the rest of their
Yes.
lives. She might have died officially in debt, but she lived a life of luxury because of her books,
I
particularly
would
her last
suggest
years.
that
Her last
on
years, particularly.
on something of that nature, you would probably, you know, I would expect to see more evidence than just your word that you suppose that to be
Well,
true.
she had massive. Look, come down the road here at Cooranbong. She had the biggest house still, probably one of the biggest houses still in Cooranbong.
Yeah, look,
She had staff. She has employees. She lived. She wanted
some
for
of those
nothing. She
houses had
wanted for
to.
nothing. She travelled.
Okay, so
She got
Elmshaven was
food.
sold. Elmshaven was sold and had to be bought back. A lot of these things had to. Oh, sorry. Yeah, like these
She
houses
was
have been
upper
bought back
middle
to the
class for
church
sure.
after being sold off at some point, or they were preserved by the church, not owned by her, as memorial locations or whatever, like museum type things. They not in every instance did they maintain staying in the place forever.
You've got
So
no written evidence of any monetary numbers of what she might
I
have
think
been
go
getting
and
per year.
have a read of the struggle for the prophetic heritage. I didn't reread that. I had these excerpts that I had
Mm.
from it. She continues to say this in her will: if the entire remainder of said net proceeds from my said properties is more than sufficient to pay my said debts, then my said trustees shall use the overplus for the improvement of the books and manuscripts held in trust by them, for the printing of compilations and manuscripts. So this is her will. Now, she wrote this to F.C. Wilcox in 1913, 2 years before. Oh, sorry, in 1900. No, it was published in 1913, but it was written in 1907. She wrote this to F.C. Wilcox, who would be named as one of her trustees. And she says, whether or not my life is spared, my writings will constantly speak, and their work will go forward as long as time shall last. My writings are kept on file in the office, and even though I should not live, these words that have been given to me by the Lord will still have life and will speak to the people. That tells me that the implicit beneficiary of her will, in terms of her writings, is the people.
But she collected her own royalties, and is there anywhere written down, say, 1997 to business year 1908, she made X amount from royalties?
There are details of that nature. I don't know whether it's like extensive, but I've seen bits and pieces that show. See, I'm honestly flabbergasted to see you coming at it from the, obviously you're not positively inclined to Ellen White, and you're saying she was rolling in
Oh
it
no, I'm
because I've seen
inclined to her as an inspirational person.
Okay,
But I would
but
imagine C.S. Lewis, I also think, was an inspirational person.
yeah, true. I would agree.
I don't put he's equated to the Bible, and if he had a few writings that were copying from things, well, he's not making any claims of supernatural nature, and
Yeah.
I'm sure he was rolling in it. That because I say that doesn't therefore mean I'm criticizing him.
Okay, well, I'm telling you from
I'm
what I've
saying
seen,
that
I've actually seen
people who
anti.
use
Okay,
the argument, oh, she died with no in debt. I'm like, come on, that's the problem one to face. The reality is she lived a life. Yeah, sure, she could give it away, whatever she wanted to do, but she would have done pretty well.
well, I've seen the anti-Ellen White people take the fact that she was in debt and that she was irresponsible with money as a reason not to trust her as a prophet as well.
Yeah, well, I
So
wouldn't
I
use
mean,
that one.
so
I
I
wouldn't use
mean,
that.
like damned if you do,
I'm
damned if
not
you don't.
using any of my arguments to say I don't
Oh,
trust her as
okay.
a prophet. There's other reasons I have that.
From what I've seen, she was so quick to give out money. That's why she was in debt. She was so quick to use money for the cause that she loved, that it did actually verge on the level of
I
what I would call irresponsibility in an earthly sense.
I don't mind what people have done with their money. I've got a
Yeah.
lot of respect for her. She did amazing things around Cooranbong.
But as far as the
Things I've learned,
beneficiary
I don't
PR,
think she's a prophet. I think she's a false prophet. I don't know whether she knew it or not. I think there was delusion, but I respect a lot of people that are flawed and faulted, and I'm sure C.S. Lewis had flaws and faults, but I love his material. I love his
yeah.
way of thinking, and I'm sure he had money. Good on him, whether he gave it away, didn't, whatever. None of that matters.
Have a read of
But
the
if he
struggle for
died
the.
and he died a pauper, okay.
Mm,
But
have
again,
a
they
read of
don't
the
say
struggle
it
for
for
the.
that fact. They say it in a way of she died, in debt, and somehow bolstered the Adventist argument.
I don't see it bolstering either side. It is what it is. It's factual based on what I've seen in works like the Struggle for the Prophetic Heritage, and even some anti-Ellen White websites that have gone about saying that she was irresponsible and therefore can't be trusted. Whatever. I just know she didn't die, in the luxury that you're talking about. I think that's definitely outside of what any evidence I've seen. So if you've got anything to,
No,
like
I
if you're
don't.
just saying, well, C.S. Lewis must, like
I
there are
don't even know if he did. He might have died a pauper as well.
well, you can think of who was the composer who died before his stuff became actually popular. So he actually
Van Gogh.
no,
He was
not Van
the
Gogh, the
artist.
composer, the
Was it Bach?
Baroque, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
So not always do people see the success of their.
None of that matters to me, but the apologists don't like hearing that. If you say something like that, there's a pushback. I've got to push you back on that, Pete, or I've got to push you back on that, because it's some way seen as derogatory. But when it's not actually derogatory,
okay. Well,
Adventists
it's either side can be derogatory. Like I said, you can see what you want to see. I mean, someone said that she wrote and borrowed from so many sources that you can see what you want. Okay, sure, whatever. I mean, like, it's kind of like have you seen Rocky 3? The Rocky movies? Yeah. You know how Rocky 3 ends, where Apollo has trained up Rocky so he can take on Clubber Lang, and he says, "I just want one favor," and the favor is he wants a rematch, and they do that, rematch in the ring, just the two of them, no one else there, and it finishes on that Rocky 3 freeze frame ending.
Yeah,
it's a freeze frame. And so you can walk away going Rocky 1 or Apollo 1.
Yeah,
You can come away with it and take whatever you want. Some of these things, we're prying into situations that we don't have all of the knowledge.
Yeah,
we don't have the context, and we definitely don't have the ability.
We've got to be careful talking ill of the dead as well. I don't like that.
We can't cross-examine. I mean, I see that as particularly an important thing to focus on, because I've had someone, only a couple of years ago, who took his life over accusations that had been made, and people believe that was confirmation that those accusations were true. And I'm like, no, you are judging someone without them being around to even speak for themselves anymore. And we've got to be very careful of things like that. What I'd like to see
back at her claims that she had messages directly in her ear from God. I don't think she did.
Well, I mean,
there's a whole other interview. This is hilarious.
We'll find out.
Thank you, Kevin, for writing. He died Baroque. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good. Can I pray to finish?
Yeah, well, just two more, and we'll close the program. And what I'll do is a quick plug for tomorrow, and then you take it away, because we have done nearly 3.5 hours. You do want to beat the Cortman one day. That's that 5 hours.
You're so easy to talk to, and your audience is, a blast. So
it's people often say, "Why are you doing this?" It's just fascinating. What's wrong with that? I'm fascinated. John says, let's talk heretical theology of SDA. That is oddly absent here. It may have been absent here a bit there today, John. Good point. But it's certainly not absent in other interviews. And Mimi writes, we've got to bring Motor Sapien. I didn't realize Motor Sapien was watching. How is having a beautiful home in California, having a cook, a nurse, seamstress, gardeners, etc., not living in luxury? And Moto Sapien writes, Jimmy James, that's an ambiguous statement. What about Jesus is true? If you think Jesus appeased the wrath of the Father, we'd strongly disagree. We'd both cite our reasons. Thank you, Moto Sapien. Look, I think this is a good one because it brings us back onto the topic. Dr. Ez says, well, I'm glad you hacked the White Estate. It helped so many of us to see the fraudulent Ellen G. White and the falsity of her ministry. Even though you defend her, you revealed her true character. And to be honest, I would have. It was the nail in the coffin for me as well.
Well, look, as I said, it's the Rocky 3 freeze frame ending. You can see what you can come away with it with two different outcomes.
Yeah,
or many different outcomes.
So thank you for doing what you've done, and I really respect your willingness to go, here we are, warts and all.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
It's how we should be. Someone just wrote recently on Facebook. One of my pastor friends wrote about how health and wealth don't indicate God's favor. And I wrote as a response to that, neither does apparent success in ministry. God doesn't work because of us, he works in spite of us. And I think that we need to have that humility to go, we're out there doing the best that we can. I mean, well, we should be, and passing judgment on where people are at. I mean, I work with Catholics through to Pentecostals, so I've just by saying that I've made everyone unhappy in the audience,
We spend our days ruffling feathers, Brendan.
yeah, because someone like the conservative Adventists are like, how could you work with a Catholic? And then, some people might be, how could you work with a Pentecostal? Because, whatever. I don't care. I will work with who I need to get the message out there that Jesus came and that he loves every one of us and that he's calling us to something greater than what we were born into. And that includes those born into the church. That includes those born into the world like myself. He's calling us to something better. And the way we treat each other is often an indication. So, yeah, do your plug and then I'll close with prayer.
Peter Mishenko, in light of saying the church are beneficiaries, I think he's saying, well, should all members be receiving royalties then? Shares in the company? Thanks, Peter. That's a beauty. And Kelly Byrne just wrote, hey, it's time for the offering. So there it is, everybody. If you've got $2 worth out of today, go to PayPal, shoot me $2. If everyone watching did that, that would really help. And, I'm not living in luxury, but I'd love to not die in debt. So if you'd like to support what I'm doing, scan that code or go over here to, where has it disappeared? Here we go, at PayPal there. You can just www.paypal.me, peterdixonmusic.me/. Honestly, I think you've got $20 worth of interesting content today. So I better send you a commission there, Brendan, for making it such a fascinating conversation. And people can go and check you out simply. Well, the best, but I often refer people to borderchurch.com. What's the title?
If you go to borderchurch.com, it'll send you to border.church. So you can see where we are at border.church. We are located on the border between Queensland and New South Wales. Because of daylight savings now being in and not being in both states, instead of 10 a.m., our services are 9:30 Queensland, 10:30 New South Wales. We straddle the 10 a.m. for 6 months. And you can watch our services on YouTube at With Girded Sword is my media ministry. If you just go to YouTube and type With Girded Sword, you'll find me. Or you can add me on Facebook. I've got plenty of room for more friends, and you can watch them live on my Facebook or on the Border Church page on Facebook as well. So there's many ways you can catch up. And if you've got any questions and you want to talk to me, convince me I'm wrong about whatever it is that you have an issue, or just get to know me, that's where you can find me.
And there's plenty of ways people can support your ministry as well. Go to those places.
So if you go to border.church, we have there's a giving page, and we use Tithely. You can pay through Tithely. You can do a bank transfer. Tithely is great because it means if you're in America, you can use it. You can use it anywhere in the world.
I should set up Tithely for this.
Yeah, Tithely is great. It's free. Yeah, tithe.ly. Tithe.ly.
And everybody will have a new thing instead of PayPal.
And I think it might be on par with PayPal in terms of how much their commission is. And you can even set it up so that if you want to give 100, you can click to say I'll pay the fee, so it'll be 102. And so people who want to give 100, they're paying 102. It's great. We got a whole year free with the website builder. Because we're a church plant. So if you're out there wanting to plant a church, and you're interested in anything like that, go to tithe.ly.
We've got our weekly church program here.
Maybe look at that.
I will. Tithely.
So
good on you.
19 for using their website builder, so the Tithely the giving app is free, but the church builder is I think $19.95 US a month, which is very cheap compared to things like and Wix and Shopify and all of those things. It's actually a very reasonable price for a ministry.
Great. I'll look into that right now.
Yeah.
And to finish off, this program has been a special edition. Some people have said, "Oh, have you changed days?" No, we just wanted to get it onto the October 22. And Brendan and I have been talking about this for a couple of months, I think. So that's why today was a bit different. Tomorrow we're back as normal, and we've got Timir Kukolja. And then the next day we've got Bill Fritz, and then Hal Southwell has got a brilliant gospel program coming up on our Friday Pacific time, Thursday night, 6:30 p.m. And I'll just, sorry to talk slowly, but I do want to just quickly say what he's called it, because it's such a good title. I'm just speaking slowly here. Yeah, it's going to be called The Freedom of the Gospel Empowers Worship. And that's going to be a really great gathering of the tribe. Join us for that one as well. They'll be posted in all the places. Thank you, Brendan. Over to you to take us out.
Can we just, can you just who was it? It was Mimi. Can you just pick up Mimi's quote? Because, comment there. Just so that we can, I'll answer that one might as well end with that.
Oh, good question. Yes. Where can we find the hacked material? Thank you.
Well, you can't, because the stuff that we hacked is superseded by what they've released.
So does the SD anonymously still have it though?
I can't talk about that. That's settlement.
Okay, but we can search sdanonymously.com and
no, you won't find it. You won't find it. So the stuff that was hacked is already available now since 2015, when they released it 2 years after the lawsuit. So you can find that on egwwritings.org, I believe it is. EGW Writings, and you just go down and there's a drop down thing. Let me just. Do you want to actually?
Can you share the screen? Yeah.
You share.
Actually, I'll bring it here.
egwwritings.org.
Yep. I'll share that on the screen. My writings will constantly speak. So bringing that up, Mimi.
Okay, so if you go to all collections,
can you see? Is that
what have you got there?
All collections.
So just do the cookies thing. I think that'll get that out of the way.
Oh, whoops! There we go. I'll decline that.
English.
So click. Oh yeah, we're in English.
Go to EGW Writings.
Will I go to all collections?
So all collections, English, EGW Writings.
Yep.
And then see where it says letters and manuscripts.
Yep.
And then bound volumes. I think that's the one. Yes, that's it. So bound volumes.
Awesome. Oh, I'm going to keep that open and read that. So there we go. That's where you can find it, Mimi, and anyone else. And
there's an app for the phone as well. So you can download the app and you can get them all on the app. I have them on the old Folio view as well. I find that to be the easiest way for my desktop. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. We'll let you close. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, Father, I just want to thank you for the time that we've been able to talk and have a robust discussion, but with respecting each other and hopefully doing our best to uplift you in the way that we treat each other. Father, I pray for the audience here. I pray for each of us, Peter and myself, who both have callings and are walking in our in the paths that we're on, that we may never forget that we are here by your choice. We are here by your calling, and that we have an identity in you. And though we can debate and talk about these things, which, for me, it's something I never really deal with anymore. And so I'm very rusty, but we might never lose sight of the important thing, which is that you valued us so much that you sent Jesus to die for us. And that's how we should treat each other. I pray for an uplifting of you through our conduct, and for healing for those who have been hurt by abuse and misuse and the spiritual tyranny that we can project upon one another. And I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Brendan. Until we meet again.